Quality just bad.
No, I guess it might actually be working. Let's see what YouTube says. Change that date to the 16th. Okay, let me test. It's coming. Let me test. That's coming through there. Okay, I guess it is gonna work today. Okay, I guess.
Really? Well, that's good.
Yeah, that's suspicious. Yeah, change the titles and stuff. Otherwise we're live. Still have other stuff.
What's up?
Otherwise we're live. I'm just gonna go ahead and change the stream titles. Anyone fill in that's filling in? Anyone fill in that's filling in? Okay, we pretty much have everything I think we need. Good to go. So.
All right. So, ready to go?
Yeah, I think that's everything.
Okay. So, starting off another week, another podcast. I actually got a bunch of different things that I want to cover too this week. We're kind of actually hitting some different things that I thought were interesting. So, obviously we got to talk about the match because that's going to be awesome. The part 4 of this whole golfing match back and forth thing that's happening. It's going to be great. I'm looking forward to it. The trash talk was awesome and the press conference that was going on. So I'm looking forward to that. We also have the NBA going on right now. There's a game live right now as we speak. I'm kind of paying attention to it a little bit at the side. But a lot of things to talk about in the NBA. We also have the Euros 2020 with kind of a crazy, scary incident happening there that we'll talk about as well. We'll also hit kind of what's that college football expansion look like and how is it going to affect all of the teams that could have made it last year. Major League Baseball, we'll also talk about the whole sticky stuff situation that's going on with the pitchers, as well as just in general, kind of how that's going and what people are reacting to it. And we got a couple of fun ones too, with, of course, wouldn't be a Dylan and Dylan podcast if we didn't talk about the Bears at least a little bit. So that'll be towards the, at some point. But I think we're going to start off right away with the match, which I don't know if you have seen any of the press conference or any of the stuff that was done with that.
I didn't see any of the press conference. I saw pretty much like tweets about Aaron Rodgers and that was it. So anything else outside of that, no,
Okay.
nothing.
So I watched the press conference. I don't know if you call it a press conference. It was more of like a Zoom meeting amongst the 4 of them, which you see right here. There was a lot of great quotes, actually. A lot of funny like trash talk. They just know how to trash talk like well, where it's like some shots where you're like, oh wow, that was a shot. But then it's also like it's in jest because they're all friends and they're doing this for charity and everything, and it's fun, which it's supposed to be, and that's totally fine. But there was a couple shots that I was really surprised with and made me laugh, and I wrote a bunch of my lines down from the whole thing that was hilarious. So right off the bat, Aaron started off wearing this "I'm offended" shirt, which of course immediately started like you could see Tom just as soon as he saw it just start cracking up. It's just funny because it's just like against everything and with everything going on and all the comments made about him and the previous stuff posted and everything. It's just awesome, just funny. I do like enjoy Aaron's personality, I guess, or like sense of humor a little bit. I actually do enjoy it, and it's great, and I love the like subtle, just comments that he makes. And this like 22-minute press conference was just awesome. It was just a bunch of different comments back and forth from everybody. So we started off with that. Then they actually talked a little bit kind of seriously about the match and stuff, and it was kind of cool. Aaron basically mentioned that he had played Tom last time at the Riviera in 9 holes and like beat him on the last putt, I guess is what Tom said. So that was kind of funny because of course, it came down. Of course, it's the last putt. And then, of course, they're going to be playing against each other this time around. So that made me laugh when I heard that, because I was like, okay, that's actually kind of funny. A little bit of history there. And then the shots started. And this is when this killed me. Just all of these shots were just so timely and so great. And if you know, like, all the references they're making to each other, it's fantastic. So right off the bat, Bryson said something. I don't have the exact quote, but he said something along the lines of, we'll see how it feels when we get out on the actual course. He's like, the balls playing with Tom were a little weird. He's like, they didn't just seemed off a little bit. So he's like, we'll kind of see how that goes when we actually get started. So I thought that was awesome. I was like, that's a great subtle, like, deflate gate reference right there.
I'm sure
That's
Brady
awesome.
can laugh about that now, considering how that year ended.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, that's most of his time for the Patriots and just in his careers. You can just go, yeah, you remember how that ended? Like, I was talking with my dad about when Tom Brady missed or forgot that it was fourth down, and it was like, yeah, that was kind of crazy, and that's like the wildest thing I've ever seen. But he won the Super Bowl at the end of the year, so who cares?
Yep, and that was the best week of the entire year for us. So that was, put that in perspective.
That was the official week that the Bears peaked.
Week of the entire year.
We peaked, and it was all downhill from there, literally.
That will be talked about. It was a mere blip in the season for the Bucs fans, but that was the peak for us.
Yep.
So,
but anyway, so that was funny. And then Mickelson, he said Bryson shot at him about like recent stuff and like what they've done recently, and he's like, I know you won the PGA, but he's like, you didn't do well in the last tournament, and he's like, I go off of what you do recently, so he's like, I'm not worried about playing against you. And then Mickelson started basically like counting all of the championships and was like, said something along the lines of, I mean, what does Tom have, like 7, 10 something Super Bowls? He's like, he just started kind of, he's like, all the championships combined between the two of us. He's like, I think we'll be fine. And I was like, that's pretty funny. He's like, of course, you always got to go like that route with those two, especially because both of them, over at least Aaron and Bryson's career being super, in the early stages. It's just funny because of course that's something that you can brag about. And then it was funny because Brady took shots at Bryson about not taking trash talk. He basically said something along the lines of, we play in the NFL where we can take trash talk or something, which I thought was hilarious because there was like that whole Bryson and Brooks thing that's going back and forth, which is something that we actually covered in a previous video, but it's even funnier just knowing that that's happening and catching these little remarks like that. And then I loved when Aaron said that his remark after that, like his next little monologue that he gave, was like basically saying like nothing's gonna rattle them, and that like they could even bring Brooks as a caddy and it wouldn't mess with them. And I was just laughing because I'm like, again, knowing the whole Brooks and like Bryson situation and those two going at it, it's just hilarious because it's just like, again, it's just subtle little jabs at each other that are like great references to like their careers, but also just timely and funny and like
just having a great time out there.
Yeah, just good trash talk, which is like what you're looking forward to in this. And then Aaron at one point said to Mickelson, he said something along the lines of, we play a sport where we put our bodies on the line and we're not sitting in a golf cart all day.
Yeah.
That was great. I was like, wow, what a shot. Like something. And then Aaron was like making fun of Mickelson's like cat, like something about how he's got Aaron has two great calves, because Mickelson's like legs have always had like issues with that, like injuries and stuff. And I was like, that's actually pretty funny.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, it's like that's kind of a low blow, but funny. And then Aaron said it was funny because then Tom said something about something along the lines of like when he was talking about like enjoying it and relaxing with them and stuff like that. He said it's like it's just fun to get out there or something, and he said like, you're able to just sit and have a cheeseburger at the end of the day or something like that. And like Aaron immediately was like, wait, Tom, when was the last time you actually had a cheeseburger? And Tom was like, all right, you make a good point. Like, it was just funny. It was like, I was like, that's actually pretty good. It's like fun little like shot right at TV. And then Tom at one point said to Bryson, you've got a teammate in Aaron who would have liked to have gone forward a bit more, so that'll be good for you guys. And then Aaron immediately said, I don't usually have the option to choose.
That's my favorite.
And I was
ones.
like, wow, I just love Aaron, like understanding that like he is in the right, which is 100% he is. He's in the right. The organization is just screwing their chances away at having a literal MVP quarterback back for them. So have fun with Jordan Love. But yeah, it's just hilarious that he's in the right and he knows he's in the right. So he's just making jokes and he's just like enjoying sitting back and just watching as like the whole world just like hates the Packers for
Rumbles.
like the Packers for being dumb.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, those were like my favorite lines from the whole thing. It was just awesome. And then Aaron at one point made a comment too at the end about Mickelson, about his how his game he's always been slower than Bryson before Bryson even got on the scene. And I was laughing because I'm like, that was the whole thing with Brooks and Bryson, where like Brooks was mad at Bryson because he's slow, like plays like a slow pace of game. And like that's been an issue, and that's why like golfers like aren't a huge fan about Bryson. And I was like, that's just awesome. That like another like shot that like if you know these guys and you know like the stuff around them and the history and everything, it's fun jabs. And again, it's just great trash talk. Like they actually just know how to do it, where it's great jabs where you're like, wow, that actually that actually hit pretty well. But then you also are like, okay, they're not walking away like pissed off at each other, like they're gonna fight each other. Like this is all in
Yeah.
jest and it's all funny and entertaining. And I think this is gonna be great. I really can't wait to watch it.
So
It's
yeah, I was gonna say, so it actually means the match itself is probably gonna be pretty fun, which is when again?
July 6th.
Oh, okay.
So
That's
July
right.
6th is the match, and they're all going to be mic'd up and have headphones in their ears, so they'll be able to hear each other's comments, even if they're on different sides of the field, which is also great because it's just going to be funny. Because it's just got like the comments, the little comments they'll make. Like I'm sure one of them is going to take a swing and like hit a ball, to the left or something like that, and somebody's going to make a comment and he's going to hear it. Like it's just fun. Again, it's just going to be a lot of fun trash talk. It's going to be golf, but like just a bit more like involved for the audience is the way I'll
Sure.
say it, where you'll actually be able to like hear them going back and forth at each other, and like of course they're going to do it anyways in jest, but it's just awesome. I'm looking forward to it. It's one of the events that I think has been great for golf in my opinion, because it's bringing, I feel like, a lot of fans that maybe don't watch golf as well, or as much as like an actual golf fan. So having like a casual fan actually experience kind of like the how fun golf can actually be when it's uh taken seriously, but not to the point where you're like ready to fist fight on the
Yeah.
whole nine. So it's awesome. I just love it. It's just again fun and something to look forward to. And again, it's one of those like random events that's just like with these random fights going on with celebrities and stuff. It's just, here's another event that's just kind of random, kind of fun. This one, in my opinion, is going to be a lot more fun than those boxing matches and stuff. But it's
Okay.
just going to be awesome to watch. And again, it's a sport that people aren't used to, so that exposure there is just smart for the sport, in my opinion. So
Yeah, it's all about that dialogue as opposed to the fight itself. As long as the dialogue back and forth is funny, then mission accomplished.
yeah, as long as you can keep like the jests going back and forth and the good trash talk and the game's fun and competitive enough where it's reasonable, and like Aaron and Tom aren't stepping into this as if they're like new golfers. Like they both are pretty decent. So like it's at least the competitive enough where it's fun to watch all four of them go at it, and especially like the team aspect and like it being Mickelson, who's been around forever, Tom, who's been around forever, both of them won tons of championships. And then you've got, Aaron and Bryson's kind of newer. And again, it's good for like Bryson, who's like, getting his name out there. Like he's known in the golf world, but he's not as well known as, other household names like a Mickelson or Tiger Woods. So getting his name out there, that's helpful too. So it's just great for the sport all around. And obviously I'm for it. And I look forward to many more after this, and I think it's going to be great. So July 6th, everybody tune in. It's going to be fun. I can bet you.
Yeah. Are they gonna keep on calling it the match part 5, 6, 7, and all that stuff? Because that part's
I mean,
stupid past like 3.
yeah, I don't even think they have I don't even think they're calling it part 4. I just called it part 4 because it's just like it's the fourth one or whatever. But I think
Okay.
it's just called the match. Like I think they're just calling it that, and that's like the title of the event for every time they do it.
Okay.
So
Cool.
which is fine. I guess it's like the name of the event instead of just like this is the match, and then the next one is like a match.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So, but yeah, it's fun, entertaining. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
The
And
NBA
then
playoffs, or do you want to go into something else?
no, NBA playoffs is good, fresh, ready to go right now, especially because they're on literally right now. I just watched the 76ers blow the playoffs away. So now we can watch. We can talk about the Nets and how the Nets initially. Okay, so this is like a two-parter because it's like I was wrong slightly about the Bucks. Like
Right.
I was wrong slightly because I really did disregard the Bucks as like being probably going to be swept, maybe 1-1 kind of thing, and then they suddenly even the series. And then I watched Game 5, and I immediately walked away with, okay, well, Harden on one leg and Durant just playing like Durant, and the Bucks can't handle it because the Bucks do it when it comes down to it. Like it's just, if you watch the end of the game. So okay, so how did we get to the end of the game first? Let's get there. So the Bucks went up to a crazy lead at half. They were up by like 14 or something stupid like that, where they were just running away with the game, and you're like, man, this is like the Bucks are actually serious this year. This is going to be their year. Like they're going to come out of the East. And then, and then Durant decided that he's going to be Durant and just lit it up the rest of the game. He played every single minute. He had like,
Yeah, that's crazy.
He had 49 points, like 17 assists, like 10 rebounds, had a triple double, played every minute. It was stupid. It was like watching him just go down the lane. He could go for a layup, or he could just fade away at the top of the key. Like it was just, he literally could do whatever he wanted. It didn't matter. At one point, he hit a three that was like one of those where he shot it at the end. I think it was at the end of a shot clock, and it was a deep three, and he was like kind of turning, and he like drained it. Like it didn't even hit rim or back, like nothing. He just straight drained it. And even he like made a face like, ooh, like I can't believe that went in kind of thing. Like I'm just like, I'm really feeling it. And so it was just that kind of night. And it's Durant being Durant. Like Durant is, in my opinion, right now, probably the best player in the entire world. As with LeBron, yes, LeBron's there, and when LeBron wants to be, he can be that as well. But I think right this minute, Durant is the best player in the world, and I think that he's playing like it. And last night was those nights that you go, yeah, he's the best player in the world. He can do literally whatever he wants. He's 7 foot tall, can handle the ball better than I've ever seen a 7-footer do it. And then not only that, but he can just hit every shot. I mean, he can hit jumpers, he can hit threes, he can post you up and hit a fadeaway shot, or he can hit a hook shot. He can drive the lane. He plays well within a system. He's just all around like just a ridiculous offensive skilled player. And it's one of those where now the question comes, how does he perform next game? If the Nets, bomb next game and the Bucks even the series again, and we have to go to a game 7, then it's like, okay, like now we need to close him out. Like you've shown that obviously you are, in my opinion, like I said, the best player in the world right now. So now that you've shown us that, now you have to show us why we can still continue to call you that after just one night by closing out the series. And that's what they need to do. So they need to win the next game, I think, convincingly, where Durant shows out and everything like that. And I think then you go, okay, the Nets are, a legit contender, and Durant is, like I said, the best player in the world. Now, the other issue is that obviously you have health issues. I mean, Kyrie didn't play. James Harden, who had a sprained ankle or whatever he's dealing with his ankle, basically played on one foot the entire game.
Or his hamstring, that's right.
Hamstring, yeah. And it showed because he literally went 1 for 10 and made one runner. And other than that, he couldn't hit anything. I mean, he couldn't, buy a basket if he wanted to. It was just bad. And so it's one of those where I'm like, okay, here we go. This is these are the questions that we had about the Nets at the beginning of the year is health. They played 8 games in the regular season, 8 games together. That's it. That's all all 3 of them were on the court for 8 games. And yes, in those 8 games, they were incredible. But again, you have to get them on the court. So the problem is yeah, we're going to, if the Nets win this next game convincingly on the coattails of Durant, okay, then now you run into, a team we'll talk about shortly, in maybe Atlanta, or even the Sixers, if they're somehow able to come back in that series. And then you're going to tell me that basically, Durant's going to carry them past whatever team is going to come out there too. So it's just, I don't know. It's a very difficult situation all around. And it's just one of those where I just go, I don't know if, I don't know if he has it in him kind of thing. So
yeah. I mean, I thought James Harden, his injury to his hamstring was going to be way worse. I thought he wasn't going to be playing for the rest of the series at least. So I'm kind of surprised he even showed up at all, even if he was on one leg, because I thought they'd be worried about like re-aggravating it for like the finals. But I don't know. I really surprised, especially considering what happened to Anthony Davis, that he ended up getting put back in the game
Yep.
that early on.
Well, and that was a situation where like they needed to get the win, and the Lakers, it was go home, it was win or go home for the Lakers there. So it was, either he plays and he goes and they win the game, or he can't, and then they lose the game and the season's over, so it doesn't matter. So that was a different situation. This one, I mean, James being able to go this game was more so about them using him as a decoy a lot of the times, or just he's such a threat to score where if you did leave him open, even if he's on a bad leg, he still might be able to, beat you. So that was part of it. That plays into the game plan where you, like I said, you have to have him out there because he's like, you have to be honest on defense and cover him. So it's one of those where I'm just like, I don't know if, that's going to be sustainable though moving forward, because if he's not healthy, even if they make it out of this series, in they win the next game, it's one of those where okay, well then we have to go to another whole series where we have a one-legged Harden. Kyrie is, maybe he's healthy, ready to go, maybe he's not, who knows. And then Durant has to carry the team basically with a bunch of guys who are good, yes, but the team was built around those three superstars. And when those three superstars are on the court, they're great. And when they're not, then they're a beatable team. So that's why I'm interested to see where that goes. And we'll see how far the Nets can go riding kind of that wave. But yeah, it's just, it was a heck of a game. I'll say that for sure. It was a heck of a game by Durant. And it was, like I said, in my mind, you call him the greatest or the best player in the world at the moment. But the problem is that for us to continue to call you that, you need to finish the series out, and then you need to continue to show out in these playoffs. And that's, we'll see how that goes. But I the one thing I will say is the Bucks. Now that we kind of get to the Bucks, the end of the game was just rough. It was just the Bucks, like all game long, were hitting shots, playing well in their offense, doing great things, and then they just kind of sucked at the end. They literally just didn't know. It was almost like they didn't know how to run an offense at the end with Durant killing them and everything. And Giannis tried. I'll actually give Giannis some credit. He tried his best to make stuff happen and make something happen, for the love of God. But yeah, it didn't look good. It didn't go well for him for sure at the end of the game. And now they pay the price. I mean, this is what happens. This is, and now you are down 3-2 and you have to win the next two or go home. And then you have a tough series coming in after that, which we'll talk about in a moment. But yeah, it's just like I said, it's an all around. I don't know what they're going to do as far as, I don't know if the Bucks are going to be able to run their offense as well as they did this game and still pull games out like this, because right at the end they were down 3 and needed a bucket, and the pass went in. Middleton put a great move on and drove down the lane and dished it to Giannis on the block, and Giannis should have caught it and made some kind of shot, and he fumbled with it. Durant picked it up, and the rest is history. So it's one of those where I just don't trust. I don't trust the Bucks. I've never trusted the Bucks, and I love Giannis. So he's one of my favorite players in the league. I just don't trust the Bucks to do anything, as far as what they're doing right now, because
Yeah.
I just, I don't know. I haven't seen them do it consistently long enough. They swept the Heat, but then they come to the Nets series, and this is the series you had to show that you were destined, you were going to be serious this year and make it out, and you're starting to kind of fail basically. And so unfortunately that's just the way it's going to go at the moment.
Yeah, the one thing, I mean, I didn't see the full game, but I saw that Giannis at one point had like himself matched up against Harden, and then like could have done anything, but he decided to do like a fadeaway away from like literally again like a one-legged Harden in, I think that was the fourth quarter as well. So I mean, the dude wasn't moving well at all, obviously, but he was still out there as a distraction, and that's really all you need. I don't know. I really thought, I thought once they tied up the series that like they would maybe push it to 7, but I feel like what's most likely going to happen is just a completely deflationary, like just walking out there and everyone's going to be deflated and they're going to get railed in game 6. It's going to be bad. So
I mean, that's what separates a good team though from like that separates a good team from a championship team, is if they come out next time and are, like you said, energy is down. They kind of it's almost like they're feeling that loss the next day. Then that's a good team who just got their butts kicked and now they're reeling and they're going to end up losing the series, and it's going to be, well, there's always next year kind of thing. A championship team, though, they would bounce back and win this next game and push it to game 7. So we'll see which one they are. And it's one of those where, yeah, yesterday wasn't great, but again, you can kind of also chalk it up to Durant was playing out of his mind. But then the other thing goes, like I said, is you want the determining factor in whether or not you're a championship team or just a good team. We'll see how you come out tomorrow, or next game, and we'll see how you perform. And if you guys come out, killing it and going for it, and you're doing great, well then, yeah, then you're going to be, then we can start taking you seriously, and game 7's going to be awesome. But if you guys come out drained and defeated, and it's like emotions are too high, and you're just down, and you let the series get the best of you, well, then you're just a good team that is going to be there every year, but never going to do anything. So,
yeah,
that's the difference.
And that's where it feels like they've been at for a long time, and it feels like that might be where they end up at. But yeah,
it's like I said, it's just I want to see them come out and push a game 7. I want to see them come out with great energy and play well and become that team that is going to compete for a championship. But again, this game is going to decide whether that's a thing or not. And it's going to be up to Giannis is going to have to play better than he has in the previous games. And he started to finally hit his stroke last game, but at the end of the game, he didn't play very well and made a couple very, severe errors where the team ended up losing. And so he needs to come back next game and he needs to play just as well, but finish the game out. And if the Bucks and him can do that, then like I said, I'll take them seriously as a championship contender, and game 7's going to be fun. But if they can't do that and they come out drained or anything like we said, then like I said, we know who they are.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. And then if they make it out of this series, they will be going ahead and taking on Nope, not on to here.
Wrong conference.
Wrong conference. Yep.
Wrong conference.
Talk about them anyways, though.
I'm going to talk about them either ways, but no, if they make it out, it'll be either the Hawks or the Sixers. But so
2 boring teams. That's why I forgot about them. They're not going anywhere either way.
I don't think either of those teams are going to beat either the Nets or the Bucks, either team that makes it out. But we'll talk about that in a minute. But anyways, you might have to find a picture. I don't think I maybe have a picture of that series. But anyways, yeah, so let's talk about Chris Paul and this whole situation. So the Suns, we'll start with the Suns swept Denver, which was great and awesome. And I think the Suns, again, I stressed this last time we talked about the Suns, I think the Suns feel like they're on this magical run to the championship, where I think they're going to come out of the West, and I think they're going to potentially have a good shot at winning the championship because they're playing super well as a team. Their stars are playing well when they need to. Chris Paul seemed like the perfect fit for that team. They needed a point guard. Ricky Rubio wasn't it. He was, older and just couldn't do it for him enough. They needed a point guard who could not only distribute the ball, but score on his own, as well, because, they kind of needed to help out DeAndre Ayton and all the younger guys that are surrounding Devin Booker. So now that that's a case and they got Chris Paul, everybody kind of, was like, yeah, that's a good fit, but it's whether or not Chris Paul stays healthy. Does the team gel together? I remember seeing a thing that said that the Suns were actually rated like the 18th best team at the beginning of the year or something like that. I forget which website put that up or whatever, which news source put that, but it is funny because they said like, are they contenders? Maybe if they're all healthy. But it's funny now that we look at it and we're like, yeah, they swept Denver, like they're very serious of a team, and it's because they've just have gelled so well together. And they're fun to watch because they play well as a team. Their stars come up in big moments. They they seem to perform and rise to the moment. They've risen to all of the moments and occasions of this playoff series, and now they're going to be in the Western Conference Finals against whoever comes out. Jazz, Clippers, and that game's going on right now actually, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the one thing I do want to say now is we transition with all that talk and about all the hype and happiness around the Suns and everything. Now what do we do about this Chris Paul situation? So I don't know if you were just talking about it before. So yeah, Chris Paul out indefinitely due to this. I think he was exposure to COVID or high risk exposure. The one thing I will say is this is blowing up the basketball world because of the LeBron situation that we had before, where LeBron was at a high risk event and was at high risk exposure and received no, he didn't have to quarantine, he didn't have to step away from anything, he didn't have to step away from the playoffs indefinitely, or whatever they said. But then suddenly now Chris Paul has a high risk exposure, and all of a sudden you're just gonna, he's out indefinitely, and he might miss the rest of the Western Conference, finals, which aren't important. It's just the Western Conference finals. So
Yeah.
it's ridiculous. It's just kind of a double standard that's stupid, and we all know that exists. We all know that stars, are going to get catered to. We know that happens and everything. But it's frustrating to actually see it when it's a real thing and it's affecting the team very. That's again on a magical run where, in my opinion, and this team is nothing is stopping them anytime soon. It's unfortunate that they're going to now get stopped by, the commissioner and the NBA, who suddenly want to start really enforcing that whole, making sure you quarantine and stay away from those type of events. When LeBron did it, they really, it was LeBron and the Lakers in the playoffs. Really, we really can't have him not, be on the team. So
Yeah.
just it's again, it's a double standard, and like I said, we know it exists. We know that specific stars can walk on water basically in their sport, and it doesn't matter. And I get that fully, but it's just annoying when it's at this level, like literally in the Western Conference Finals for a team that swept the other team. Which, when a team sweeps the other team to get to the Western Conference Finals, usually a good sign that they might actually make the finals and play very well in the next series. Well, guess what? Now you've just taken away the piece that I just talked about, completed this team, and now we go back to the team last year that was fun but not very good without Chris Paul. So,
yeah. And it's funny you say the double standard too, because it'd be one thing if it was like a role player in LeBron, but I mean, they're both stars in their own right. So it's kind of interesting that there's a echelon above just normal stars, and then there's superstars, and then there's this. What is the tier between them? I mean, they're not that far apart, especially in terms of publicity. So,
no, they're both superstars. I mean, granted, LeBron has been the face of the league for so long, but they're both superstars. I mean, Chris Paul is a household name that is in commercials nonstop. He's been around. Everybody knows who Chris Paul is. It's one of those where, he's not LeBron, but he's as close as you get to that name. It's the same.
yeah.
It's just one of those where they're both, there's star in the NBA. I kind of consider it, star players are players that, are very, very good for their teams. Superstars are the players that are like, serious. Like Luka's a superstar. Like that, Luka became a superstar when he started hitting game-winning shots and he started carrying his team through playoff series and, games and all that. Is one of those where Chris Paul's a superstar. So same with LeBron, they're all in that category. So the fact that this is happening from one superstar but not for another is that double standard that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So, and especially, like I said, again, we talk about one team who didn't get in trouble with their best player during, a qualifying round to get into the playoffs and then the first round. But now we're talking about this levying this type of punishment instead on a player, a superstar caliber player on a team that's in the Western Conference Finals is ridiculous.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I wonder, I know there's like, obviously it literally just came out today, but it could be possible that the very worst case that he'd be able to be back at the very best case of the worst cases, he'd be back and just miss, I believe, one game of the Western Conference Finals. And then there's obviously the worst case scenario where he could potentially miss all of it depending on their court. I don't think there's there's not a very outlined approach. I know they have to follow their protocols, but obviously nobody knows like what tier he falls into for what his quarantine period is going to be. So it's pretty much just like a new story, and nothing else has really come out next to that. So kind of just waiting to see.
It hopefully, not so funny, but this series right now, which is actually game 6 or game 5 is on right now of the Jazz Clippers. If this one goes 7 games, that's also going to factor into it too, because that's going to take it longer for them to actually get to the Western Conference Finals. Whereas if this is over in game 6, then we're talking about a shorter break, where it's a shorter it's a shorter time for that quarantine period to potentially take it, be in effect and everything. But yeah, I don't know what tier he's on or that. I don't know if they've really said that or anything, or like how far he's going to, how long it's going to have to go as far as quarantining. But it's just, again, it's ridiculous. It's, either have clear punishment across, all of the players, which is what they should have done and what they've said that they're doing, and, then they don't do, or, or allow him to play, have him take a COVID test, negative, boom. Okay, well, you can play for game one. Like, it's this whole thing with, like I said, I'm not taking away from the fact that people should quarantine. Like, I understand that people should quarantine and should not. My problem with the situation is don't have a double standard with the same rule when, one of those affected a player for a team that, lost round of the playoffs, instead then start taking it effect when it's a team that's in the Western Conference Finals with one of their, key, most important players.
Yeah. No. Be interested to see how that works out. It's almost I don't remember, at least in the playoffs starting, I remember the last time there has been like a quarantine situation, so that's kind of funny to think about when that was all you heard about throughout different sport leagues or anything else outside of the NBA playoff bubble, because obviously I don't think there was a single one in there on purpose, but it's kind of crazy to put in perspective how this seems like such a strange thing and such a weird thing, being like, oh wow, he tested positive for that? Like, imagine that.
Yeah. No,
things move quick.
It's an odd situation for sure, especially because of, everything, there's been pretty quiet as far as players having any issues, and, their bubble was pretty successful with 0 cases and everything. So it's one of those where I'm just like, again, why are we really clamping down on this immediately when you didn't do the same for another superstar? So it's just, that's where the anger comes from. I'm not, trying to say anything about, the severity of COVID, or I'm not trying to make a commentary on like, people shouldn't quarantine. Like, I'm just literally citing that the NBA needs to hold all superstars and all star players and all players accountable, or don't, because you can't just choose one side when you want, because it's a player that's the face of the league, and you can't have LeBron not in the playoffs versus, now you're going to take away a key player for a team that's young, up and coming, hasn't been good for years, since Steve Nash was there and Stoudemire and that whole thing, and they're running the 8-second offense. I mean, that's years and years ago, and it's a smaller market team too. And again, them trying to push smaller market teams, they should be happy that the Suns are in the Western Conference Finals and potentially probably going to go to the finals. And, here we are.
Yeah.
So, well, speaking of the Western Conference Finals and who they might be playing, we have the series, which is actually going on, like I said, as we speak. I do have it on here over the side, so if you see me peeking over there, I'm kind of looking at the score, seeing what the pace of the game looks like. It's late in the second quarter, and it looks like Utah is up by 6, so closer game for sure. The Clippers don't have Kawhi, and I heard the whole time that it was going to be potentially an ACL thing, and they were scared it might be even an ACL tear at the worst, or it might be, a partial tear or something like that. That's basically going to keep him out of the playoffs. And it came back, I believe that it was a sprained knee, so it's just a sprain, which is still
really. Wait, when did that come back? Like, just now?
I saw that got reported on Twitter by Shams, so I'm not 100% sure if that's fully true, but Shams is pretty reliable as far as NBA news. So that's what I heard from him, or that's what I saw from him. So that's what I'm going with, is that it was a sprain. If that is the case, it's a better outlook for him. I don't know. Again, it's too soon and everything. I don't know what the outlook would look like as far as him making it. Like, if they made it to Western Conference Finals, would he even be able to participate in those? Or would it be one of those where his team would have to make it to the finals before he comes back? I don't know, but I do know that it's not going to matter, because the Clippers are going to lose if they don't have Kawhi.
Yeah.
Yes, it's just, at the end of the day, I don't foresee the Clippers having enough to beat Denver. With just like, I don't, Paul George, we talked at ends last time about the Clippers and how Paul George is just not the guy. I love Paul George. I have his Pacers jersey, hung up in my closet. He's just not the guy. He's not an alpha. He's a guy who's a second or third player on the team, or should be a second or third option as far as scoring. And he's now being asked to basically be the primary scorer, which might work for, a game, but it's not going to work for the playoffs. And so I very likely scenario is that the Clippers lose game 5 right now and then game 6 and are out of the playoffs. And then this whole Kawhi thing is like well, maybe they were good if it's the same situation that happened with the Spurs where the Spurs were destroying the Warriors by like 30 points in game 1 of the series. And then Kawhi got injured on a illegal play.
Yeah.
And then, the Spurs lost the next 4 games and everybody was like, oh, if Kawhi was there, they probably would have beat the Warriors that year. So it's the same kind of scenario where people are going to say like, well, if Kawhi was healthy, look at how this team was playing. And it's like, yeah, but they're also the Clippers and, haven't been able to do it. And that's why there's talks of them getting Damian Lillard before they even are done with the playoffs. When that starts happening, when people start talking about like what the acquisitions could be to improve the team next year before they're even done, like in the playoffs, that's a good sign that your team is not expected to, go all the way. And I saw a thing that was like, if Kawhi's healthy, do you think the Clippers are the favorites in the West? And I was like, no. It was like they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
It was like they should not be. Same thing with the Bucks. Like the Bucks, they could have the best record in the East. They should not be the favorites in the East because they haven't been able to do it ever. If you did it the previous year, great. If you made the finals the previous year, great. Then, you deserve maybe favorite status. But same thing with the Clippers here. Just because they have Kawhi and Paul George has not meant anything. And so I'm not going to, call them a contender or call them the favorites until it means something, aka win the series. So,
yeah,
we'll see how that goes. Like I said, I do think that the Clippers are basically going to be knocked out after game 6. And I think you're going to end up with the Jazz Suns Western Conference Finals, which is just kind of a wild scenario and to begin with, because it's 2 teams that haven't been very good for years and then suddenly are at the top of the Western Conference, and it's awesome. And I love the small market teams getting, the notoriety and finally, building correctly, basically, which also, it's one of those where, getting, the big name players and stuff like that, like in the Clippers and the Lakers and all that, sometimes doesn't mean anything when, you put Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, who's, you put a Donovan Mitchell is more of a scorer. Then you put, Rudy Gobert, who's a, great great defender around with a bunch of good players, very good players that all fit and complementary to each other. And this is what happens is you get a good all around team that you're seeing in the Suns and now in the Jazz. And it's going to be awesome if those 2 teams play. So honestly, even if Kawhi is suddenly back next game and the Clippers maybe are the favorites, I'm still rooting for the Jazz because I still want to see the Jazz make it out because I think a Jazz Sun series is going to be fun and good for the NBA. You could say all you want about, well, they're not going to draw the same numbers that maybe the Lakers versus whoever is going to draw. Yeah, that's probably true, but also just for the sake of the NBA, I'm happy to see 2 teams that don't usually get there. So
yeah. And so just as an update too, so I saw the tweet from Shams at that time too. The most recent thing is thinking it's an ACL injury, and I believe so it does seem more serious. And I believe what they do, as I was reading about this, is they like the physical tests, the actual like tests they do for the ACL is like 99% accurate. It's very, very accurate, but apparently it's something called the drawer test. And I was reading about this as I was walking around, and it's kind of disgusting. But if you want to think about it in this way, I guess the whole point of it is to basically put your knee in a certain position that if they pull on it, if it comes out like a drawer out of a file cabinet, that means that it's torn, it's gone. There's no resistance. There's nothing holding that in place. And if there's resistance, then your ACL is still intact and you're in a good spot. I think the belief is that he failed that drawer test, whether it be, I don't know, maybe you have to be a full tear to get that drawer effect, or maybe it's just a partial tear, or there was pain, something like that. But the latest on it is that it is a very serious injury and he's probably projected to be out. I think they're just saying indefinitely. Even if it was a tear, it's supposed to be weeks at minimum.
Yeah.
To even be effective.
Yeah, he'd be out for the playoffs, the entire playoffs. He's out.
Yeah, so it's looking very poor. They said the last update I think was from Ty Lue saying that they were going to get the MRI results in like 48 hours. As they're, he's obviously trying to remain optimistic and hold out for that, but that's where it leans. So very not good. Very not good. Very bad day for injuries and players exiting the playoffs.
Yeah, which I did hear. I saw the tweets. I don't know if you saw them. Did you see the tweets from LeBron about the whole situation?
I did.
And everything?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I kind of have to agree with him a little bit. Injuries are never good for any sport. Whenever you see injuries happen in a larger sum than normal, that's usually not a good sign. And especially guys like Kawhi. Like, you want Kawhi in this playoff series because it's tied 2-2, and a Kawhi right now in this game might mean the difference between the Clippers making it to the championship or the Clippers getting knocked out in game 6, like I think they're going to. So it's one of those where when you see a star player like that go down, and it's going to affect the team greatly because of that and kill a team's championship hopes, basically. That's one of those where, I don't think he's wrong in that category, that, they need to really evaluate the way that it goes and everything, as far as, when they schedule games and how they're trying to get it compacted and, practice and, just everything, just as far as it goes.
Yeah.
And I do understand back in the day, yes, players played all 82 or whatever you want to say, and, about it and everything. But it's one of those where, as the game goes, everybody gets faster, everybody gets bigger, everybody gets, just more athletic. That's what happens. There's a reason why, back in the day, the fattest player in the entire NFL was the Fridge, and the Fridge was listed at like 305 or something like that. It was something stupid like that. He was bigger than 305, but he was listed like low like that. And then you have guys like Mekhi Becton coming into the league who are 6'7", 360 and runs like a 5 flat, which is insane for a guy his size. So
yeah, he wasn't even that big. Oh my god, that's why I'm looking at this. Like, his weight was 335 and he was 6'2".
Yeah,
like, that's not even.
And he was like, like literally people were like, oh my God, the Fridge, he's the biggest man in the entire, he's as big as a fridge. And it's like,
yeah, at the time,
like, look at Akeem Hicks. He's like 6'5", 350. Like,
that's a good comparison, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Akeem Hicks is like a bigger version of the Fridge.
He's 6'5", 325. So he's got 3 inches on him.
Yeah, he's listed at 325, but he's probably higher than that.
Yeah.
It's one of those where they always list him lower. But
oh, he's listed at 347, 6'4" now. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems more accurate.
That's more right. I was going to say that's about right. So that's what I'm saying. It's people don't realize that just people got bigger and faster. Like, Julius Peppers did not exist 30 years ago. Like, Julius Peppers being at the time a 6'8" man who people in practice used to say, like, hey, the scariest thing about Julius Peppers was when I was running down the sideline, breaking away from everybody, and I turn and look over my shoulder, and Julius Peppers is catching up to me. Like, that's a 6'8", 280-pound man who's catching up to a running back. Like, that's the level of athleticism that we have in this league. I mean, look at DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf, we talked about how him placing 9th in that race for trying to qualify for the Olympics was like, he placed 9th. It was like, yeah, well, he barely lost to a bunch of guys who are like literally 6 inches smaller than him and like 40 pounds less than him, and have been training their whole lives for this. And then this man goes, I kind of feel like training for it for a couple of weeks. I want to try it out.
Yeah.
And then literally at 6'4", 240 ends up almost placing. Like, it's just the level of athletes that are in, the NFL and the NBA and everything nowadays is insane. And so, I mean, look at Durant. Like, it's 7-footer back then. You would have been lanky and you'd have been a center and you wouldn't have been nowhere near as athletic. Then you see Durant and you go, like, he's literally 7 feet tall, can handle the ball like any point guard in history, and then can also shoot from literally anywhere. And it's just an impossible cover. Like, you can't cover him. So it's just like, it's the athletes in the world have changed. And so our protocols, as far as practices, playing, games back to back or whatever it is, the rigorous schedule, travel, all that has to change as well. And I do think that needs to be stressed a little bit more. they already do play 82 games. 82 games is a lot of games. It does wear on you over the course of a season. Just go look up the number of miles that Steph Curry runs over the course of a season. It's a stupid large number. It's ridiculous how much he runs during a game.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with football players over in Europe and stuff with the Euros, 2020 that we're going to talk about in a little bit. Like they also run like crazy, and all those athletes are bigger and faster and than they used to be. So it's just that's the way the world goes. So they do need to evaluate a little bit the way that we handle injuries, the way that we load management has been a thing where I do kind of understand it. There's a reason why LeBron is still playing at this type of athleticism at his age and how many years he's been in the league. Like it's because he's taking care of his body, because of the load management type of seasons that he spent, and that plays into his longevity where he's played, 17 years and is still playing at, peak performance almost, or near peak performance. And, that's attributed to the way that he's handled his body and everything. And that's the way that the NBA needs to go. And so that's why it's, again, I don't disagree with him in the fact that, yeah, athletes, they really needed to evaluate how they do that, especially with the NBA this year, trying to compact everything and trying to make it go and, and make it work. And, this is what happens. Star players go down in crucial moments, and then, the whole world gets mad about it. And now the series is nowhere near as enjoyable as it would have been if Kawhi was in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, you probably say Kawhi's the best player in the series amongst these two teams. He probably is. So then if that's the case, you're taking the best player out of the series and then now trying to have the series go. And, it's one of those where it's not obviously the production of the actual value you're going to get out of the series goes down.
Yeah. I was just watching on the side all the choking memes for the
Yes. So now from that rant we'll flash over to 76ers who I actually was the game was at halftime when I wrote my notes for this podcast and everything. And when I wrote my notes, I literally wrote 76ers on their way to the Eastern Conference Finals championship. And then the second half happened, which was after I wrote my notes. And I watched the 76ers just fail and just do everything they possibly can to allow the Hawks every chance they could to get back into the game. And they did just that. And shocker, when you give a team, opportunities over and over again on offense and you miss opportunities on your side and one of your best players can't hit a free throw to save his freaking life in Ben Simmons, then yeah, that's what's going to happen. That's why, again, I said the 76ers, I thought they were going to win this series in 6 games, which apparently now is not happening at all because they decided to choke that opportunity away.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the 76ers team that was going to win 6 games was going to lose the next series. I literally didn't matter who they played, the Bucks or the Nets, they were going to lose the next series. That's how it was going to go because I don't believe in the 76ers because the 76ers do this every year. And unfortunately, they have their 2 star players on that team in Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid play 2 positions where, in 2 styles of play that are not sustainable against these other teams that have, again, Ben Simmons not being able to hit a jumper or a 3 to save his freaking life, and then not being able to hit a free throw so much so that it's becoming a whack-a-ben at the end of the game. It's ridiculous. It's just absurd. You're a point guard. Hit more free throws for the love of God. Like it's so stupid. It's work on your shot in the off season. You can't be this bad and still be working on your shot every single day. There's no way. If that's happening and you're working on your shot every day and you're still this bad, then I don't know what to tell you, man. Just do what you got to do to put the ball in the bucket. But it's just
dodge those swipes at the end of the game for free throws.
Yeah.
Don't get fouled.
You better get real good at doing some little jukes and shakeouts because it's just stupid. It's so dumb. It's so bad watching this team. And then they have to rely on Embiid, who's a center. And unfortunately, as a center, he's limited. That's the way it goes. It's, dominant centers used to be a thing in the NBA, but then the NBA transitioned to a more smaller ball with more athleticism and more, shooting and everything. And when you have a center who's as good as Embiid, you can definitely get as far as the Eastern Conference semifinals. But then guess what? It goes away when you don't have the other pieces that can take you further, like the Nets do with Durant or James Harden or Kyrie being available, like the Suns do with Chris Paul and Devin Booker, a point guard shooting guard duo who can play really well in the backcourt and make a lot of shots and 3 points and everything, and are a good 3-point shooting team. Like a Jazz team that we're about to watch, like a Clippers team that've got Kawhi and Paul George. Like there's a reason why the 76ers, in my opinion, are never going to make it anywhere near, anywhere past the Eastern Conference Finals to a finals, or even be competitive in an Eastern Conference Finals if they made it, because they're not viable as a team to go that far and win a championship.
Yeah. I mean, how old is Embiid? I have no idea. Do they have a championship window?
5?
Oh my God, that's it? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, dude, Ben Simmons is like 23 years old. 24 years old. Yeah, okay. Ben Simmons and Embiid have been in the league for like 5 or 6 years, and they're both like 24, 25 years old.
That's crazy. So, I mean, I guess they have flexibility, but...
Yeah, but the problem is that when Ben can't shoot to save his life and relies on athleticism and his skill and everything, and that's great, and it works well for you enough to get you this far. But then when you can't shoot to save your life, well, guess what? When your athleticism starts to go even a little bit, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Jason Kidd's athleticism he started shooting threes. LeBron starting to become a better shooter. Like, it's just, you have to adapt, and it's eventually it's going to lead to where Ben's going to just end up as basically John Wall, essentially. And John Wall's a good player. He's a great player, but John Wall's not winning you any playoff series anytime soon.
Right.
That's how that goes.
Yeah. Well, that's a good transition into, I thought it'd be fun to go from the bottom and then go to up, but you could start out with Patient Zero made it to third team.
Yeah, Patient Zero. He's also the defensive player of the year. So, I mean, he is a fantastic defensive player, and that's why he makes it to the All-NBA third team. And he's part of the reason why the Jazz are so successful, because he's such an integral part as far as defense and, running their offense, and just plays very well within the system. And again, is one of the best defenders in the league. So that plays, very well into that. Mm-hmm. Then you have Jimmy Butler, who is Jimmy, and when Jimmy wants, he's one of the best players in the world, but sometimes he doesn't, sometimes he does. It's just Jimmy. So, unfortunately, that's what you got to deal with. And then, Paul George, obviously being on the Clippers, they've been pretty successful this year. Kawhi Leonard's, basically, running mate, and Paul George, that makes sense. He's a great two-way player, one of the better two-way players in the league. Like I said, just not an alpha. That's his problem. That's why he's on the third team and not the first or second.
Right.
That might be a dig, but that's the truth. Bradley Beal, who's like one of the most underappreciated superstars or stars in the league, because he plays on a team that's just not good. And he's unfortunately had John Wall and Russell Westbrook as his running mates, who are basically two players that are never going to win you a playoff series, because never win you a championship, because that's just not the way that they are. I said that even when Westbrook was, I've said that actually in previous podcasts. I've said Westbrook as a superstar is never going to win a championship. That's unfortunately the way that he's built himself. That's just how it is. So, yeah, I'm not surprised one bit that, he's there, because again, he just plays for a team that is just not good enough to make it far or make it anywhere in the East. And he's like one of the best superstars. He was a star player for a couple of years, and then really has like evolved to become like a 30-point a night, like crazy scoring, one of the best shooting guards, which, by the way, I've heard some rumors about, like, maybe the Bulls could try to go after him. Now there would be some draft capital issues, and Patrick Williams, the rookie we took this year, number 4 overall, would probably be included. So, there's some things there that you could take, questions about, but I would not deny it, considering Bradley Beal's that good. And then Kyrie Irving is Kyrie Irving. He's one of my favorite players. When he's healthy, Kyrie Irving's, one of the best point guards, if not the best point guard in the league when he's healthy. I mean, yeah, you could talk about him and Steph, or, Damian Lillard for sure. In my opinion, Damian Lillard's probably the best point guard besides Steph right at the moment, because he's just all around. He's just one of the best scorers in the game and one of the most reliable clutch guys in the game. But yeah, it's Kyrie when he's healthy and playing, he's great, but it's just get him on the court. Whenever he's actually on the court, he's good, but it's been a problem to keep him on the court this year and in the past. So that's why he's here.
Yeah.
So now we go to the All NBA second team, and we start to get to kind of the bigger names. So off the bat, Chris Paul being here, it's great for Chris Paul because, again, he was a integral piece to why that Suns team has been as good as they are and been on such a magical run. And that's why they're, basically, in my opinion, if he's actually going to be able to play, they'll be making a run for the, championship. Then you have, Julius Randle, who played for the Knicks team. The Knicks team was much better this year, and Julius Randle exploded on the scene this year. And he always had a ridiculous talent. He just never was able to meet it with production. And this year he did finally. So he started finally producing at the level that we all expect him to. So yeah, he's very deserving on this list. If the guys that were on the first team weren't there, then yeah, he would probably be on the first team because he played that well this year and deserved it with the way that team played, bouncing from the previous year. Then of course you have LeBron. LeBron should be on an all NBA list no matter what, because I mean,
league required, has to be somewhere.
Yeah, it's the same way that like when Jordan was playing, he had to be on an, he would be on an NBA list at some, every single year. Same thing with LeBron. He's just got to be. I mean, he's literally one of the best players in the league, if not the best, at times. Which
by the way, since you mentioned Michael Jordan, I forgot if I sent it to you, but there was a like a review of kind of like, I think it was like slow motion or something, or just kind of I think it was like an interesting
his ball fakes.
Subreddit. Yeah, the ball fakes. That I think I've seen that a few times, but still, I just saw it randomly in the morning, and I was just like, it literally, I don't know how you would beat that. Like, I don't know, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, listen, ask anybody that played against the Bulls in the '90s, and you'll just it's a Did you watch The Last Dance?
Oh yeah, I watched, and I saw that a lot there too. It had just been a while since I seen it, and it was just it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I with Jordan, it's one of those where, and it's a lot of players back in the day, like even Charles Barkley, gets clowned on a little bit. Like people need to watch the highlights because like Charles Barkley was ridiculous. I mean, he was one of the best players who never won a championship. He's the player that you refer to as like, the good players that'll never win a championship. He's literally the top of that list because he was that good. He probably should have won the MVP that year over Jordan. I'll just say that right now. And he got beat in the finals by the Bulls. But you have to go back and watch their highlights, all of those players' highlights, to appreciate just how good they were. And of course, Jordan being the cream of the crop, the GOAT, the greatest of all time, no questions asked, in my opinion. He's the greatest of all time. Go back and watch all of his plays and all the intricacies and all of his game. That's why he was the greatest of all time, because literally everything. I mean, his ball fakes. His footwork was some of the best in the entire NBA in the history of the league. His down low game was incredible, for a shooting guard. His shooting, his three, just everything. And like literally the only thing that was average about the guy was 3-point shooting, which is,
wasn't important then.
No, teams did not shoot 3 points all the time. And guess what? When he needed to shoot 3 points, he set the record for the most 3-pointers in a half, in a finals game. So it's, at the time, of course, it's been broken since, but at the time, so
I just couldn't imagine having the ability to literally ball fake a defender onto your teammate and still hold the ball. Like I saw those a couple times. That's just, it's literally unbeatable. And then still being able to hand off. Like if you're still distributing it to somebody else, literally faking it onto one teammate, he's gone off of you, and then just throwing it to somebody else if you want to. It's ridiculous.
Well, and it was because it was such it played well because ball fakes work if you're a threat. If you're a threat to do something with that ball, with the ball in that direct, and that's why Jordan's ball fakes were incredible, because like you were just so twitchy as a defender on him because you were like, okay, he could post me up, he could spin around me, he could go left, he could go right, he could dish it somehow, or he could just go over me. That's a possibility too. He might just jump over me. Like I don't, that's why there was just so many issues with him. Or even if you tried to foul the crap out of him and made contact, he might still make it. So and then he was also like an 83% career free throw shooter. So
right,
what do you do? Nothing. You just try your best and hope for the best and don't piss him off. That's literally basically it's just don't piss him off, and hopefully maybe he'll only score like 30 points.
Which, by the way, the last part of this segue, and not to segue out of here, but did you know apparently to continue the Last Dance hype, Scottie Pippen is like releasing a book or something addressing it. I heard that on the radio, and I was like,
saw that.
keep feeding the beast, just keep the hype in the media.
As much as I love Scottie, there's just Scottie's just. It's just him.
That's what I think. I think it was Waddle or something on ESPN 1000. It was just like, of all the people to call this stuff out, the guy who like sat deliberately in a playoff game and then like held out all these different. You're not in the best position. That's not in the best place to say that.
And like, I will say, I get why he sat out of pissed off about his contract. I mean, the man was paid ridiculously low for his talent. Being one of the top 100 players of all time, and he's not being paid anywhere near some of the good players in that league. Yeah, that's, yes, was it on him for signing such a long contract and everything? But also it's a little bit on the Bulls too for kind of playing him that way. And we all know how Jerry Krause is. I mean, literally became the bad guy in that, series. So we all understand that the position he was in sucked. And then the whole sitting out in a game-winning shot, which then Kukoc hit, is doesn't look great, and that's why I always say Scottie's just Scottie. It's just why am I not surprised that he's coming out with a book where he's gonna tell it how it is, and he's gonna tell it how his story, because that Last Dance was more Jordan's story, and it's like, yeah, it was more Jordan's story because Jordan was the team, like he was the greatest player of all time. Like what? You want us to just like, if we did a documentary on LeBron and all the teams he went to, are we just not going to talk about LeBron? Are we just going to be like, yeah, they had this guy, LeBron James, he was pretty good, but they had, that team did have Kyrie Irving, which was great. And you're like, okay, like, tell me more about this LeBron character. Like, this is, that's what I'm like, it's just, what did you expect the Last Dance to be about? Especially, the way that it is and everything, like, it's about,
he's just got to sign those checks. He needs, he's got to make up all that money he lost from his contracts and all that. Not that I'm sure. Well, I mean, God, didn't he make? I remember that was part of it too. Didn't he make up like so much of it with his like final years of play? Like he pretty much rode everything else till retirement and got the bag in the end.
He signed a big contract with the Blazers when the Blazers tried to do the Blazers. People forget about this, but at the end of the Scottie Pippen run in his career, he tried to like sign with the Blazers, and they tried to almost form like one of those like older players super teams, and he joined like Clyde Drexler and all them, and it didn't pan out, obviously. Otherwise you would know about the team and how they won, whatever they did, but they didn't, and it just didn't pan out. But he made a decent amount of money from that contract, at least. Don't get me wrong, not what he's worth as a player, and not what he was worth as in his career for the Bulls, but it is what it is. So, but yeah, no, sorry. Okay. So that was a little side note. We can talk more for sure about that. We'll maybe make that like literally a segment next time, because that's coming out and everything. We'll talk about that. But I've actually been meaning to watch The Last Dance again. So maybe when we, we'll do that at some point as like homework, and then we'll come back and like really talk about it all, especially now that we have an avenue too. So, but I transitioned back. We're back into the all second team talk. So I left off with basically LeBron, and that's where we start talking. The other two guys on this list is obviously Joel Embiid, who very deserving being on the list, considering he was up for the MVP potentially. Again, health is always an issue with him, and being healthy for the whole season. And then obviously I've said on end tonight that the Sixers are just underwhelming, but so he's deserving at least himself. And then Damian Lillard, who is like one of the just careers that I hate to watch, but love to watch, because I hate to watch it because I know this career is never going to go anywhere if he stays with the Trailblazers. And again, that's another player, by the way, that I heard linked to maybe the Bulls could try to make a run at Damian Lillard, which would be incredible. But that's a pipe dream. But Damian Lillard needs to get out of Portland. As much as I respect his staying for his team, being a legend there and being a part of the city and being loyal and everything, that's great, buddy. But like, I really want to see your career somewhere else where you could potentially win a championship, because, and I've said this before, and we've talked about it with Kawhi's injury going down, and Kawhi's on this list too. he should go to the Clippers absolutely if he has the chance, because he would win a championship immediately with the Clippers, because the Clippers, again, like I said, Kawhi, not really an alpha. He's made some shots at the end of games, don't get me wrong, but not really an alpha, not really a guy who's going to take over a series on his own single-handedly when needed, like Durant did yesterday.
Yeah.
So you get Damian Lillard though, suddenly now they have a guy who can do that. And then you're talking Paul George is your number 3 option and Kawhi Leonard's your number 2. That's insane. That's going to be an insane team. And if he joined the Clippers, they'd win the championship the next year, without a doubt. So Damian Lillard, criminally underrated, and is, again, we've said this last week, one of only 2 players that has hit 2 game series ending shots, him and Michael Jordan. So that's something to be said about that. And yeah, so now we transition though over to the NBA first team, which has, of course, Giannis on there being, the highest seeded team in the East. A little disappointing, as we've talked about previously, and a flawed superstar, as I've said in a previous video. And I say that because the man needs to shoot better. Like, he shot well last game, and you saw suddenly when he started to shoot better, wow, the Bucks are a legit contender when he can shoot well and is a threat in that department. He needs to do that. Same conversation we had about Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons is not as good, in my opinion, as Giannis, but they have the same problem. Both of them can't shoot for crap. And that's a problem. When you can't shoot, then, what are we talking about here? You play a game where literally it was based around shooting. You need to do that in order if you're going to win a championship.
Hot take.
Yeah, crazy. So, yeah, that needs to happen. That needs to be a thing. Of course, we talked about the Bucks endlessly, so I'm not going to go on another rant. But then we move over to Jokic, who deservingly MVP of the league, lowest draft pick. We've talked about this in a previous video. Check that out if you want to, if you're interested in learning a little bit more about Jokic and his run. It's exciting. Love that he's on this team. Of course, he's pretty much a guaranteed spot on the NBA first list when he wins the MVP trophy. Pretty much guy who just won the most valuable player in the league should probably be in the All NBA first team. So he's already had a spot given. Steph Curry, who was, in my opinion, probably the next man up for an MVP trophy in that department. That makes sense to have him there. I mean, he literally put them on his back towards the end. So that was great. And then obviously Luka, I talked about earlier as being a superstar and being, the guy kind of thing. So that's not surprising in the least that's, he's on the list. And then, of course, you have Kawhi Leonard being on the list, which, again, makes total sense, too, because, Kawhi Leonard is the best team on the Clippers team, which is a really good team. Kawhi Leonard's probably the best 2-way player in the league as far as, offense to defense. A guy, again, I have some qualms about Kawhi Leonard in general, just over the course of his whole entire career, being kind of a guy who's really not, an alpha who's going to be able to, be the guy most of the time. That's why we talked just a moment ago about Damian Lillard needing to be there. So, but it makes sense that he's on the list because he's a very good player, had a very good season with a very good team. Unfortunately, it's going to come to, his season has come to an end with the ACL injury, and this team's probably come to an end as well, because I think they're going to lose this game, and I think they'll lose game 6 and be out. So we'll see how next year goes, and we'll see if they're able to get Damian Lillard. But all NBA teams, I'm totally fine with them. The one thing I will say, though, before we move on, is that I did think this was interesting, is I saw that Jason Tatum, who played insanely well for the Celtics this year, as well as Donovan Mitchell, were both left off of the All-NBA list, and it actually lost them, because of the way the NBA does it with all of their contracts. As you get certain honors, you move up for certain things, like Jokic getting MVP, moved him into the, being able to get the Supermax deal, and have the largest contract in history if he wants, when they offer it to him. Same thing with same thing with Embiid. He was he's up for the Supermax based on his all honors and everything. It's not going to be as large as Jokic's, but it will be up there as well. I believe it was 4 years, 191 million, so he's not hurting for cash in that department. But the one thing I will say is that both of these players, because they missed all NBA honors, are now about to lose out on 33 million each on their contracts.
Oh, it is each? I was wondering when you sent me the notes if it was both of them. Wow.
Nope. 33 million each. that they would have had extra. So like instead of their contracts being worth 190 million, now they're only worth 160 because they missed out on NBA honors, and unfortunately that plays into being eligible for certain contracts.
Wow. That's oof.
That sucks. Especially because we're watching literally Donovan Mitchell play well in a playoff series about to go to the Western Conference Finals. And then you talk about Jason Tatum, how basically, I mean, he was the reason why the Celtics were as good as they were. So like those two players missing out, and it's hard because you play the game of like, well, who should get snubbed? But
Yeah.
it's one of those where, that sucks. I definitely would not want to be missed out on $30 million because I wasn't, winning a popularity contest, basically.
Yeah, how does the All NBA team work? Is it like reporters, or is it like the fake Pro Bowl stuff for the NFL?
I think it's voted on by. I think it's like I think it's like a reporters thing where it's like, people. It's like a certain amount of people that are associated with the sport or have been associated with the sport that earned this, the vote or whatever. I think that's what it is, if I remember correctly. So it's one of those where players always get overlooked for these teams, and other times NBA teams, you're like, why is this guy on the All NBA first team? He should have been on the third, or vice versa. But these two guys getting left off is rough because, like I said, losing out on $30 million on your next contract is not great.
Yeah. Wow.
So,
it's a rough day.
I know they're still going to make like 160 or 170 million dollars, but
they won't be out on the streets, that's for sure. But
but 30 million is still 30 million.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Wow.
So, yeah. So that's my last note for that. Now transition to another interesting topic in sports right now. The national championship playoff, the college football playoff is what's better known as, was being played the last few years up from 2014 on to current in 4 teams, where the top 4 seeds that are voted on by the committee end up in the playoff. That is now being talked about as basically being expanded into a 12 games or 12 teams national championship playoff tournament, which will basically, and we'll kind of break that down. Have you seen anything on this? First, I'll start with that.
No, I am uninformed on this, and this was a story time sort of thing for me, so I'm kind of curious the feelings are in this. I've never really liked I never really liked like the selection committee for college football in the first place. That's pretty much my contribution to this.
Well, it's so the selection committee has always favored the power. If you're not familiar with the college football or college in general, there's the Power 5 conferences, which is the SEC, the ACC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the Pac-12. Those basically 5 conferences are called the Power 5s because they are where basically the majority of the money and majority of the good teams are. I mean, let's be honest. That's where a majority of the good teams are. So those conferences are always favored because the level of competition is higher than in other conferences, and they just have bigger names, more money, all that fun stuff. So, and those are the conferences that hold teams like Alabama, Clemson, Texas, Texas A&M, Ohio State, Michigan, all those, schools that you've heard of or known in any sports, you'll hear those names.
Gotcha.
Florida State, all of those. Now, that being said, the committee's always favored those Power 5 conferences, and they always kind of not denote, but like just don't show any love really to the other conferences, as well as maybe even teams that are in those conferences that aren't as big as some of the other teams. They don't show as much love to, so they kind of have a lot of favoritism going on, and that always is shown. Notre Dame, for example, of the 12 people that make up the committee, one of them is literally from Notre Dame. So because of that, Notre Dame having 1/12 of the vote over all of the other college football teams is part of the reason why Notre Dame is usually rated a little higher than they should be. And I'm a Notre Dame fan, and I'll readily admit that that's usually the case, and I get that. So not only Notre Dame being rated that high and everything, but then I think if you looked at the history of the playoff the last 7 years that it's been going on, you basically have like Ohio State Alabama, Clemson, and I believe it was like Oklahoma and Georgia taking up like 90% of the appearances in the playoff versus like any other team, which is just sad and unfortunately why the playoff was flawed and why it needed to expand. Now, I will say I thought it should have expanded to 8 teams, and I thought it should be the Power Five conference champions should all make it automatically, and then it should be the 3 at-large bids that the committee votes on based on teams like UCF talking about how they deserve to make it, Coastal Carolina talking about how they deserve to make it this year, being a smaller team, Cincinnati talking about how they should have made it this year. Things like that would have been those 3 at-large bids. Now, the way that this 12 team expansion is going, which is, like I said, it caught me off guard because I didn't think that it would go as far as 12 teams. I thought maybe they would move to 8 first and then expand to 12 or 16 from there. But going straight to the 12, it does make a little sense when you actually look into what the ratings are. And of course, we can get into how it's going to favor teams or whatever. But essentially, the way that it works and the way that they broke it down for as far as like what they're actually voting on is there is 12 teams that would make it. 6 of them would be the 6th highest ranked conference champions. Then from there, you would have the other 6 teams being the 6th highest ranked non-conference champions. So even if you didn't win your conference championship, but you're rated super high, let's say Alabama plays Georgia and Alabama's 2 and Georgia's 3, and they play in the conference championship and Alabama wins. Well,
Okay.
how much do you really, take? How much do you really, hurt Georgia as far as rating and everything for that when they were playing the number 2 team in the nation that won the championship? They would get it essentially. That's how that would play. Now you
Okay.
would also get teams like this would add Cincinnati in the mix. This might add Coastal Carolina in the mix as well. Things like that.
Okay.
Because it's the highest 6 conference champions, then 6 non-conference champions, the highest rank. So kind of plays out that way. So it puts a little more emphasis on the conference championship, which means that the regular season matters a bit more because if you make it to the conference championship, you have an automatic bid if you win it. So it's one of those where you have incentive to make it and win it.
Okay.
Now for other teams that don't win it, again, like I said, that shows where in that scenario where Georgia's number 3 and Alabama's 2, even though Georgia lost to the number 2 team in the nation and aren't a conference champion, they would still make it as a non-conference champion. That's where that would kind of, they would factor in. Some other things interesting about this is the top 4 ranked conference champions. So the top 4 teams, so the top 6 conference champions make it. The top 4 of those get ranked 1 through 4 and receive a bye in the first round. So
Okay.
essentially, you have this previous year, you would have Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, and Georgia all being ranked 1 through 4 and having buys. Essentially, is how that would have worked this previous year. And then you would have all the other teams, Cincinnati, Coastal Carolina, all these, Penn State, all these other teams that would have made it but would have had to play. So the first round would essentially be 8 teams playing, 4 teams, the top 4 being on a bye. Those 8 teams would play. Winners of those 8 teams would be 4 teams. Those 4 teams would play the other highest 4 seeds, and then you move down the line until you get your champion. That's the way the tournament would play out. Now, something interesting about this is the requirement for being a top 4 ranked team that wins your conference championship that gets a bye basically is built in that any independent team, such as Notre Dame, who doesn't play a conference championship would not be eligible for this. So they wouldn't be eligible to make it as a conference champion and receive a bye if they were one of the top 4. So that means that Notre Dame could win all of their games, be the best team in the nation, be the number 1 ranked team in the nation, and they would still, no matter what, not receive a bye.
Okay. Interesting.
So it's an interesting, but I believe Notre Dame actually supported this or something like that, or supported this venture. So it's one of those where, like, it doesn't sound fair to Notre Dame, but also Notre Dame, the whole playoff committee and everything, and even before that, there's a lot of favoritism shown to Notre Dame. So, it's understandable now that there's a little bit, the pendulum finally swings a little bit in the opposite direction. But that's just something interesting. So that's the way it would play out. So again, your top 4 teams being like the previous year, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, all getting a bye. And then the other 8 teams fill in from there and play each other to then play those top 4. So
Okay.
you finally get matchups where basically, Cincinnati makes it. Cincinnati wins their first game and then has to go against one of those 4 teams. Well, they can finally prove whether or not they're one of the teams that should be there or not.
Right.
And you can, say that the committee. Now, the issues with this is that, of course, people are well, it's if the committee's ranking them and say like Ohio State, who we're expecting every year to pretty much win the Big Ten. It would be shocking if they did it, kind of thing.
Right.
Or Alabama, if they didn't win the SEC, it would be not shocking, not as shocking as Ohio State winning the Big Ten, but it would be a big deal. Same with Clemson not winning the ACC. That would be shocking if they didn't. The thing is it's one of those where those teams are probably going to be ranked very high. So when they do win their conference champions, they're probably automatically going to be probably one of those top 4 that get a bye. So then maybe there's some favoritism there that can play, but at least those other teams are at least getting a chance, when they never did in the past.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
Yeah, I can see that. I guess I could see the merits of it then. Just an interesting change. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, it would be Coastal Carolina, you're in. Cincinnati, you're in. Those are the 2 teams that were really, talk UCF from that one year. They're in. And you finally get those teams that are like, okay, now prove it. You've talked a lot of game, and you've talked yourself up a lot, and that's great. And you know what? Coastal Carolina made the freaking playoff. Like if we had this tournament last year and they played and made it and won the championship, I would be ecstatic. It'd be amazing. But
yeah,
it's one of those where now it's a prove it kind of thing. And again, like I said, the 4 teams getting a bye. We know who those 4 teams are probably going to be almost every year, but at least other teams are getting a chance to make.
And what was the team that there was like the meme of? I think it was like a year or 2 ago that like they are the actual champions and stuff because they didn't get ranked. That was UCF. That was UCF. Okay.
Yeah, UCF is the one that declared themselves national champions because they didn't get a shot at the playoff and they won technically all of their games, and then they went and won against Auburn in their bowl game. So.
Okay, got it. That's one struck in my head.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. UCF would immediately make it in this scenario. Now, this if this was voted, this is being voted upon, I believe, later this week in Chicago, actually. Which I saw a great tweet that was like, I absolutely wish that we could I think it was Cam Ellis, who I love, who used to be for NBC. I forget where he is now, but writer for the Bears. Love him. If you love the Bears, you should follow Cam Ellis. He said something about like he wishes that he wishes there was a world where this committee was just voting inside of a Portillo's parking lot. And I was like, absolutely, that would be fantastic. Just this whole thing gets voted on in a freaking Portillo's parking lot would be amazing. But yeah, so we'll see. They're meeting in Chicago this week to kind of, determine whether or not they want to move forward with this decision. If they did move forward with the decision and it was voted upon, yes, and put into effect, it wouldn't take effect for, I believe, until 2023 or no, 2024. I think it is.
Okay. Do you think they will approve it?
I think it's really up in the air. Like I can't say either way. Like I honestly don't know. It makes a lot of sense. And the issue with NCAA, the issue with college football recently has been that, again, like I reiterated at the beginning of the segment, is that Clemson, Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama have basically taken up the majority of the spots in the college football playoff since its existence 7 years ago. So it's one of those where college football has been losing some popularity because teams aren't getting a shot. So at least this would give teams a shot, even though there's still some favoritism towards those top teams. So I think, yes, I would say if I had to be like put to it 100%, give my opinion, I think yes. I think it's going to be a tight vote, but I think a yes, because I think they have to save the sport and I think they have to expand because they have to include other teams. I'm tired of every year hearing about UCF or Coastal Carolinas or Cincinnati's and not seeing them at least get a chance, because I would love for them to get a chance. Like I want to see if they can prove it, it's one of those, we got the game of BYU versus Coastal Carolina, and that game ended in literally a last second pass caught at the 1 yard line. Time runs out, BYU loses and Coastal Carolina holds on. Well, what we learned was that was a great game and those were 2 good teams, but like we, until we see them in the playoff winning games, we don't know how either of those teams are. Maybe those 2 teams would have beaten Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, all them, who knows? We don't know because they weren't in it. That's the problem. So they
Yeah.
need to expand. So I thought eight teams was where they were going to go next, because obviously that's the next evolution of going from 2 to 4 to 8,
Right.
but they're going to jump right up to 12 and go with these rules. I'm fine with it.
Okay. All right. And then in terms of the MLB.
Yes. So in terms of Major League Baseball, this is the sticky stuff situation. Such a sticky situation that it is right now. Terrible, I know. Starting off the segment with a bad joke. It's not going to go well. Anyways, yeah, pitchers right now in Major League Baseball are getting in trouble for using what we call sticky stuff, which is basically kind of an overall term for anything combination that they're using to get more grip on a ball. So people have been in trouble for your sunscreen in the past, using sunscreen mixed with the rosin to kind of create like a stickier substance that allows them to grip the ball better. You get more break in your balls if you can grip it better and everything. So, and this year, it's been crazy how like the advantage towards the pitchers in almost every single setting. And there's been a lot of issues too with teams and players obviously using like for instance the Garrett Cole interview. Have you seen this clip, or did you watch this clip at all?
No, I have not. Let me figure out how I could bring that up here really quick.
Oh god, yeah, I'll talk about the situation while you bring up that clip. So just find the Garrett Cole interview about it, and it's incredible. But I will say though, overall, what Major League Baseball has come to is essentially they are now going to have umpires check the starters every single start twice, randomly per start. And what that means is they're going to come out, check the mitt, check the wrist, check the hat, everywhere that you would potentially hide it. Guys back in the day used to hide stuff on their hat, so then they'd readjust their hat and immediately pick it up on their thumb, and then they would spread it in their glove so you couldn't see, or they would be on their glove, or it'd be on their wrist in the glove, things like that. So those, that's always been it's been an issue. It's been a thing in baseball. There's even a guy in the Hall of Fame. I can't remember what his name is. There's a guy in the Hall of Fame who literally is known for being a cheater and doing it. So, it's one of those where it's been a thing in baseball for years. And it's kind of weird. Like I heard Scott Van Pelt make a comment that I thought was real, and it was basically saying, why is it that we punish hitters so badly for cheating, but then pitchers, like there's literally guys in the Hall of Fame that have been known to cheat. So all kinds of things like that questions you just have to ask, like why is the Major League Baseball choosing now to crack down on this? I know the league it's an issue this year, but it's been an issue for years, and this is the first time they're finally deciding to make it apparent. So, and then the other issue too is, which has been brought up, is about punishment for this versus punishment for other things, which we'll talk about in a minute after this clip. But essentially, to finish up with it, if a player is now found that they are using an illegal substance, what ends up happening is the player receives a 10-day suspension where it's a suspension without pay. So they essentially would miss about 2 starts.
No, wait, it was suspension with pay, wasn't it? That was what was insane about it. It literally was like, take some time off, relax, like do whatever you want with it. I'll verify that, but I think it was with pay.
I thought it was without.
Yeah, I gotta see that. It was like a hilariously. Yeah. Okay, any foreign substance for 10 days with pay.
Oh,
which how is that a punishment?
Yeah,
that was what Charles Barkley was talking about with it.
We'll talk about this after. We'll talk about the punishments and the ridiculousness of it. And another pitcher chimed in, which I 100% agree, which is very close to home. Let's first get into this incredible interview. And now I'm going to preface this with saying, never in my life have I seen a person more guilty than Garrett Cole in this interview. And it's incredible. I don't know if you can hit play and it'll play the audio for. Is it playing the audio?
Yeah, let me go ahead and boost it 1 sec.
Hold on 1 sec. Restart the video too when you do that, because it's incredible. It's just so good. When you heard it the first time, I was just like, what a terrible answer. Like, just bad. And
No, let me go ahead. I could share my. Oh, I need to share my audio with you. Hold on 1 second, just so you can hear it on your end.
Yeah, I just want to hear it because it's amazing. I've heard it multiple times, but it's also just hilarious every time I do hear it. So what an interview. What an answer to a question, man. Garrett Cole, so composed, so just, on it, brutally honest, so prepared for anything. That's what I think about when I hear this interview.
It
Really.
looks like I'm gonna play it on the side. I don't know if you're able to hear it, but you could probably pull it up on the stream. It looks like I can't share my actual audio with you.
No, that's fine. Just play it. I
OBS.
know how it goes. I more so want your reaction. So you asked him about the spider.
I don't know.
Did he zoom freeze? Oh.
No, he just literally froze in real life.
I don't quite know how to
He just doesn't know how to answer it because yes, the answer is yes.
I mean,
like if you could not get
a customs and practices that have been passed down from
so bad.
Older players to younger players, from the last generation of players to this generation of players, and I think there are some things that are certainly out of bounds in that regard.
As a Yankees fan, I still had to laugh at this.
Stood pretty firm in terms of that, in terms of the communication between our peers and whatnot. And again, like I mentioned earlier, there's
no way he does.
This is important to a lot of people that love the game, and this is including the players in this room, including fans, including teams. And so
it's like
if MLB wants to legislate some more stuff, that's a conversation that we can have.
We're so guilty and we can't come up with an excuse.
Ultimately, we shall be pulling in the same direction.
So oh my god!
Oh my!
That interview. What an answer! Have you ever used the spider tech before?
The correct answer with that is just no. You're not in a criminal trial, man. Just say no.
I don't know how to answer that.
No.
Like the reporter should have just been like, so the answer is yes. Okay, thank you.
Dude, you're not. Again, this is not a criminal trial. Just say no. Just lie. It's so much easier.
Dude, just lie. Like we know pitchers are using it this year. You're probably guilty of it. So just lie.
Yeah.
Why? He's just so bad. He's just such the face of a honest man right there. Just totally nothing on his conscience. Totally not doing anything wrong.
The MLB PR team clearly did not get to him with their base rehearsed answer. I mean, this is literally the equivalent of just I'd prefer to keep my medical history to myself when people are going to ask about vaccinations. It's ridiculous.
Yep.
Okay, thank you for your 3-minute response on this very simple topic. It ended up with basically no. Thank you.
Dude,
now we can all move on.
Reporter gave you a layup for you to just completely go, no, I've never used any type of substance like that. I pride myself on playing the game the way it should be played. Boom,
right.
Done. Answer given. If you're ever found guilty of it, listen, you're guilty anyways, so nobody's gonna care about your quote. So, but if you're never found guilty of it, well then guess what? The only quote that's ever said about it is what you just said. So the fact that we now have you on tape going, I don't know how to answer that, and you're like, really? You don't know how to answer a yes or no question?
Yeah.
Yes or no. Have you ever used it? Either the answer is yes and you're being very honest and good for you, but you're now going to be in trouble, or the answer is no, and at which point just either say that or lie. There's two ways you could say no, honestly or lying, and either way at this point, for the love of God, make it apparent.
Yeah.
It was so bad. It was such I heard the interview and I was just I've never heard a guiltier man ever in my life than Garrett Cole answering this question.
Yeah, man. No confidence at all either.
The fact that you had to go, did his Zoom freeze? Nope. Just
because he was
just his brain froze.
Just had to reprocess that, really give it. And honestly, what were you even waiting for? We waited and you were loading and processing a response, and your response sucked. You still failed.
That's what I'm saying. You didn't you could have taken a second and been okay, how do I answer this well? And people would have been okay, that was kind of a weird long pause. But then if you gave a reasonable answer afterwards, people would be like, oh, maybe it's Zoom, maybe it's the the weirdness of the press conference. He's processing the question over video. It's kind of odd, whatever. He gave a good response. But no, literally just the worst guiltiest possible response you could give is what Garrett Cole did.
Yeah, no, seriously, like 10 seconds in, I was like, just pull the Ethernet cord out. Just like walk, like, just, it's better. Give
Why
yourself
is
some
somebody-
time.
Why is somebody, like some Yankees employee's got to be standing back there with a sign like, no, the answer's no. Like some employee grabbed a card, wrote no on it, and then held it up behind the camera. Like,
Yeah.
the answer's no.
He's got this
Oh,
long-winded
God.
response. He's reading off a paragraph, and then the guy's just like, look, right here. Just no. Never, never. Me, the MLB, I would never disrespect the competitive nature of the MLB. Absolutely not. It's a ridiculous question. Move on.
Dylan, me and you just came up with answers on the fly as people that have nothing to do with the situation better than we did. Like,
Mhm.
it's just, it was so bad. That's why I had to have this played, because it was just like, I can't believe what I've just heard. But
It's legendary.
anyways, it's overall, the issue is it's one of those where, again, it needs to be addressed in sports, because it's not, in especially baseball. This is cheating that's been going on for a while. We've seen this throughout. My favorite was, I forget which pitcher it was, but had like on his hat, you could just see, like, on the TV broadcast when they would show him, you could just see like a dark substance just on his hat, and you're like, come on, dude, come on.
Yeah.
Like, you gotta find a better way to do this. Like, somebody had to give you like, hey, that doesn't look great. Like, walking out of the dugout, like, even the trainer's got to be like, dude, I think you're laying it on a little thick on the hat. Like,
Yeah.
but
You're making us
yeah,
all
it's
look
just,
bad.
it's bad, and it's baseball just doesn't want younger fans. I've ranted about this so many times, and I'm just so tired of baseball. I love you, baseball. I love you to death. I love the sport. I love the Cubs. I love the Yankees. I love everything about it. I've watched since I was literally like 2 years old. I
Yeah.
hate everything you do. Love of God. And actually, pitcher Carlos Rodon from the White Sox actually came out and said, when he was asked about it, we made another great reference, which is another great thing that I'll talk about real quick. Another short rant that I have to go on real quick because it's just super frustrating. Is basically Rodon said that, I love that they're coming down on pitchers on this punishment like this when they didn't come down on the Astros at all. And I was like, yeah, thank you. He's like, yeah, the team that literally cheated their way to a championship. It's not like they were runners up. It's not like they made it to the West, the conference finals. They won the freaking championship. Known cheaters, like, brutally cheating. Like, if you heard the videos, like, at one point they got in trouble. For anybody that lives under a rock and doesn't know, the Astros got in trouble for basically cheating and like calling out pitches or certain pitches to the batter, so that way the batter knew what pitch was coming, so that way he can then either take the ball, take a strike, swing on it, hit it, whatever. It helps when you know the pitch coming as a batter, as you can imagine.
Sure.
So they did that to a ridiculous factor. At one point, I remember one video where literally you would just hear from the dugout, bang bang, every time he was going to throw a fastball, which is the easiest pitch to hit because it's a fastball coming down the middle. It doesn't have any movement on it, and if you know it's a fastball, the speed doesn't matter because you'll catch up to it.
Yeah.
So the fact that they did, and literally, it's so bad. You'll just be hearing it, the silence. Pitcher's ready to go. The sign gets thrown out from the catcher. Pitcher confirms what pitch he's going to throw, and then you just hear bang bang from like the side, and you just go like, come on, do it any more discreetly. Can we do it any more discreetly? And then
Yeah.
lo and behold, the fastball comes. Or then, and then they like wouldn't say anything. Next pitch was a curveball out of the zone, and the guy took it for a ball, and you're like, come on, for the love of God, just like, can we be any like clearer that this is cheating? And you know what they should have done? They should have taken the Astros championship. They should have taken it away. They should have removed their championship because they did not deserve it. And guess what? Which, by the way, actually, this is something that I don't know if you know this. Being not as big of a college football fan, did you know about the death penalty in college football and that it was used once?
No, I had no idea what that meant when I read it.
Yeah. So there's a thing called the death penalty in college football, and it was used once. And guess what? Teams after that said, not going to do that. And what it is the death penalty was handed down to SMU at one point, And the death penalty in college football is the removal of your college football program for a certain amount of years.
Oh,
They just
okay.
remove it. That's
That's
it.
the death
Like,
then. I get
no
it.
college football for you.
Yeah.
Like, it was handed down to SMU, and it destroyed that that school, and it like their programs never rebounded. They've never been near as good as they were before that. And guess what? Teams don't go that far anymore because guess what? They don't want to get that handed down to them either.
Yeah.
So it was a crazy thing where literally they just, guess what? You don't get a college football program anymore. Everybody's got to leave. That's it. Done. So
Wow.
yeah, and it was bad, and it was guess what? It scared teams because teams were like, "Hey, don't want that to happen to us. That punishment's going to happen." Same thing should have happened here. Take away the Astros championship, and guarantee you no team is going to do that ever again. Because if they're caught 10 years down the road, they know that they're probably going to lose their championship. Now you've
Yeah.
set a precedence where, well, guess what? If you get caught cheating after the fact, well, you won a championship. Who cares?
Yeah, I always thought that was stupid. The punishment had no ramifications that really affected. I don't know, not in a serious manner at least. It was just kind of like whoopsie.
Well,
Sorry.
it even went as so far as like when Yu Darvish came to the Cubs and was still kind of struggling. Like people didn't realize that Yu Darvish was one of the pitchers that they did that against, and like kind of ruined because like Yu Darvish was really good, and then kind of got ruined a little bit mentally because of that because he was like not pitching well against them, and it was in the biggest moment and everything, and it hurt him. And pitcher's mentality and everything is huge, and it hurt his mentality bad because he wasn't performing well for his team like he was, and he felt like he should have been doing better with the way that he was playing, and he wasn't. Well, guess what? It's because they were cheating. So, and he was like ruined for literally a year or two. So
I didn't even
that's
know about
like,
that or think about that. That's
yeah, he was one of the pitchers that dealt with that. So, and in the biggest moment when you had it all year, and then suddenly now they're hitting everything and pitches aren't working, and you're letting your team down in the biggest moment. Yeah, that's going to do something to you mentally. So no
yeah.
surprise that he had a bad year after that, and then a bad year with the Cubs the first year that he was there, because that's how that goes. You have to get over that mentally.
That really,
So,
I didn't even think about the market side of it, but man, that screws up your contract negotiations. It goes into
Yep.
your stats. It goes into draft capital that's given up if you're traded for. Like, oh, there's a lot of fallout from that, and there should be better ramifications because of that. Imagine if you screw over some guy who's like willing to sign a massive contract because you destroyed him in the playoffs or something, or made a fool out of him, or the draft capital of the team that wants to rebuild and maybe get rid of him, and they don't get as much anymore now because of that. Like, wow, that's how to become hated by the entire league. That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, they're booed to this day. And guess what? If I went to a Cubs game and the Astros were playing, I would boo them every single time that they appeared on the field, and would tell them, "Hey, how's it going, cheaters?" I wouldn't even call them the Astros. I'd call them the cheaters.
Yeah.
Hey, the Cubs are playing the cheaters today.
Yeah.
Because that's how they should feel. That's that's what they deserve. The players and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And the fact that the organization let that go on, I'm internally, I'm sure there's people that knew, and those people should have done something, and they didn't, and they won a championship, and they didn't get punished enough for it. And so now you set a precedence where in the future, hey, if you cheat and you win a championship, well, if you get caught, yeah, it kind of sucks because people call you a cheater, but you got a championship.
Yeah, worth it. No
So,
big deal there.
unbelievable. And then let's move on to another ridiculous situation, which is actually really sad. And this is why I want to talk about this, because this is crazy and absurd and stupid. Um, God, do you know anything about this? Have you looked into this at all?
Nope. Nope.
Okay.
What's happening?
So I'm gonna butcher her last name, but this is Shelby Houlihan,
Okay.
which is a controversy that's going on right now because she was banned. She was notified that she tested positive for an anabolic steroid, and was notified that basically she was banned for 4 years from track competition. Um, right before she was about to appear on a race, or in a race that would have qualified her for the Olympics. Now, this is also a person who holds 2 world records because she's that good. Now, the reason why she tested positive for this is interesting, and where the controversy begins, because apparently what happened is she tested positive for it. She herself has claimed that she's never taken the substance. What she figured out, though, is that the night before, and again, this is going to sound ridiculous, but follow me. The night before, she ate a pork burrito from a taco truck. Pork burritos and pork in general are known to have levels of this anabolic steroid because pigs produce them at high levels. And so then it bleeds into the actual pork that's produced and then served in restaurants and various places.
Okay.
They knew this. I forget what it is. It's like the WADA or something like that, or whatever it is that is monitoring this. They know this. There's actually tests that have been run on these samples to determine like what the level of this anabolic steroid would be in a person that would have consumed pork. She tested at that level. They just assume though that she had tested for the steroid because she took the steroid, not because she would have consumed something that would have led to her test. She actually gave them a hair sample and they tested it and it was negative for any buildup of the anabolic steroid, as in like she'd been taking it for some time. So
Wow.
essentially their assumption is that she just took it this one time for this race and that was it, and that's the only time she's ever taken it in her career. But yeah, now you're banned for 4 years. She's also 28 years old, Dylan. So
Oh,
the next Olympics
4 years?
Yeah, the next Olympics that she's eligible for is the 2028 Olympics.
When she'll be 32, 31?
No, because she's 28 right now. 2028. We're talking 7 years from now. So she's.
Oh, I was thinking 4. Okay, I was thinking 4 more years. Oh, but yeah. Okay, so that's it. You're done.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to be at the level that you are right now, for sure.
Like, and is there an appeals process?
She tried to, and they denied it.
On what grounds?
Listen, Dylan, I don't know. And the funny part too is they said that in the past this has been something where it's flagged for a odd test or like an atypical test, and then they do further testing to make sure that it was confirmed. They didn't do that.
Why not? They didn't follow the process they established?
No, they basically just put it in as she tested positive for the steroid because she's taking it, and that's it. She even passed the polygraph test.
That's, I mean, you've exhausted the avenues of where you're going to go. At what point does it go into a lawsuit because you can claim that it's damaging your brand and also your finances?
That's where I think it would go next. I mean, she was about to perform in a race that would have qualified her for the Olympics.
Yeah. That is tremendously depressing.
Yeah, and apparently this is like a known thing. Apparently like pork does test for this specific anabolic steroid, and it's known to, and there's certain levels that it would test in the person, and she tested at about those levels, meaning that she probably got that result based on a food that she consumed, which she did know and has the receipt and knows that she did because she gave them the last 15 meals that she had eaten. And of the last 15, that was the one that she had eaten the night before at a taco truck. She ate a pork burrito, and yeah.
I don't even know. I mean, that's just, God, I mean, that really sucks. I can't believe they don't follow up on that. There's no further, they didn't even follow the process they outlined.
Yeah, I almost feel like it's them like doubling down on the, like, when, you know how like sometimes people or organizations will do that where they'll just double down even though they know they're wrong. They'll double down on their decision because
trying to make an example.
Yeah, like they don't want to seem like they don't want people to question their authority or whatever, Like I feel like almost that's this type of situation, because if like all the facts as I've just laid them out are true, this is ridiculous. I mean, it's absurd. And this is what I've done, like looking in research, and I looked into it and looked into articles about it and everything. And this is, so far from my understanding, everything that I've said is true. So if that's the case, it's like it's one of the craziest cases I've ever heard, where a girl's literally going to be removed from her prime to the Olympics, and basically her chances at winning the Olympics because of a pork burrito.
I mean, it's a great headline, but man, that's destructive on a human scale. Man, that is sad. Yeah, what a terrible place to double down and try and make an example of someone. I mean, like literally follow the process you outlined, or at least follow up with hard evidence. I mean, what is that? Whatever commission it is that's doing this is that's sad. You don't really gain any credibility from doubling down on this situation. It's more of just fear mongering or something at that point. You're not adhering to any of the standards or the policies that you've set out. You're just making an example out of someone to scare other people off. And I mean, sure, maybe the outline is people be really like, I don't know, really tense about what they're going to be intaking and watching all that. But at the end of the day, where are you actually getting with this? You're not getting a better sport out of it. You're just ruining and putting doubt into all the individuals that are making up the sport. So that's ridiculous. And it's a time sensitive thing too. I mean, you don't have much time to fix that, and it doesn't look like you can anymore.
No, I mean, missing an Olympics is, like, if you're at the end of your prime and you're getting into an Olympics and you're like, this is my last Olympics where I'll be at my peak performance, and then you're not allowed to be in that Olympics, 4 years is incredible for a track runner.
Yeah, like, that's ridiculous. 4 years.
Yeah. 4-year ban, which means that she wouldn't be eligible until the 2028 Olympics for that would be the next Olympics she can perform in at the age of 35. And this is a woman too, like I said, who I believe owns 2 world records.
Wow. I hope there's something to be done. I'm trying to see like where everything got left off, if they still have the appeals process, but like there's so many things you could be sued for there.
Well, that's the other thing too that I think about is like, if this gets rectified in courts, is it going to become where she'd be eligible for the current, like the next Olympics, or is it going to like take, because appeals and court cases and process take, I mean, they take a year or two, at best sometimes. So it's one of those where I almost feel like it might go to a point where she actually gets this decision rectified and righted, but ends up basically falling time where she's just now past her prime and the Olympics have passed.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's a very I doubt anyone's gonna come out happy on the end of that. I don't know how you even rectify that, because how are you supposed to project like the financial damages that you would have been incurred if you were in an Olympic spot as opposed to not, because then you have to both imply that you're going to win in whatever Olympic sport or Olympic event you're going to be in. I mean, that's very tough.
Just to comment on that before you finish, I mean, she's also has 2 world records. I believe it's 2 world records. So like, obviously she would have a good case for why she would perform well. So that's to add that to your conversation there.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the estimation of that, about where you would end up like compensating someone in the event of a lawsuit, because you have to imply so many things. You can't really estimate exposure as much as like a prize pool. That just seems like the situation where the person who's actually suing is just going to come out disappointed either way. Like there's no way to make up for missing. I mean, financially, you're not even talking about the awe of being in the Olympics and participating in it, but just financially, you're going to be disappointed, not to mention the other side of it being emotional and missing out on that. I don't see any case where that ends up going well if she does not win her appeal, or if she still hasn't a chance to appeal. And it seems like one of those things that's just going to get swept under the rug, and yeah, maybe it'll get brought up in court cases later, but it's going to be out of media attention. It's going to be out of their time period of being in their peak. It's just a bad situation all around.
Well, yeah, and the sad part is, and you make a great point with the media attention, because unfortunately the media has a very short attention span. We all do. And it's one of those where, unfortunately, this is probably not going to get rectified, if it even ever does, until past any point of anybody caring enough to, to appreciate that the decision was overturned for a poor one in the first place. And that allows the behavior to continue, because then in the future, if they make another decision like this, well, it's only affecting one person and nobody's going to care past it, because nobody's probably going to care too much about this come a week from now. So
yeah,
it's just really sad. It's something that I saw and I wanted to highlight, because I think talking about I like bring new topics on this podcast and bring topics that I want to talk about and things that I find interesting. I know that you would find interesting, as well as our audience. So this is definitely one of those things that I just was like, I know that this probably isn't going to get a ton of media coverage, just because everything surrounding it, but it's one of those where I had to cover it, because it was just like, I'm shocked by the decision and the rashness and the crazy effects that it's going to cause in this woman's life. And it's unfortunate and sad, and I wish her the best and hope that she's able to get this solved and maybe be able to participate in this Olympics. I mean, again, it's one of those where people train their entire lives for Olympics, and so to have even if she's participated in one before, you know,
Yeah.
it's still the Olympics. They come around once every 4 years, and you only have a window that's very small, maybe two, maybe three Olympics if you're lucky. If you're one of the top athletes ever, you get three. So the fact that one of the two that she maybe have is privy to, being well or performing well in at peak performance is sad and unfortunate, and that's why I wanted to cover it.
Yeah. Well,
So
unfortunately,
never
moving out.
I was to say, unfortunately, not moving on to another really positive topic. So now, one thing I will say is I chose this image specifically to talk about this topic because one thing I wanted to point out was I don't know if you saw it. Did you see any of the coverage about the actual incident?
Oh yeah, yeah. That's the part I did see because I didn't see anything else about the games. And when I started to pull it up, that's immediately what I saw instead of actual gameplay.
Yeah, and I thought it was unbelievable, and actually, like, it actually hurt me, and I had to like stop. I had to look away and like stop because, like, why did nobody at one point decide that they should throw to like, go back to like the main, like throw back to studio, like get out, like they were like zooming in on his lifeless face on live TV, and I'm like, for the love of God, his wife is on the field right there. Can we just like
I didn't get to
this?
see that, and I'm not gonna lie, I was looking for that, but I'm pretty sure it was intentionally gone because I wasn't seeing it in real time. I couldn't see anything
Yeah,
else
it
except
was.
for the text of what was happening.
Oh my God, dude, it was brutal. It would literally at one point they like lifted his head to like I just reposition it for the CPR, and his like eyes blinked open and he was literally just lifeless, and they zoomed in on it, and I was like, for the love of God, just have some kind of taste, some kind of just, understanding that this is a human being on the ground that
Yeah,
is potentially at the end of his life, and you're just going to broadcast this live. Like, I just, like the fact that players had to actually interlock arms around him to stop people from seeing, it was so sad. And I just honestly, I had to look personally, look away from my own, like, I can't look at this anymore. Like, after I saw that, like, literally them show his lifeless face, I was like, this is too far. It was like, this is way too far. And journalism and sports media especially can go too far at times, and this was one of those times because it was just like, this does not need to be shown. Like, this does not need to be seen. This is the not only is this potentially the end of his life, but this is the end of his career for sure for the rest of his life. So it's like unbelievable that it was just bad. It was just, I was watching and I just couldn't. I was like one of those where I was like, this is one of the only moments that I think I'll ever just go like, I don't need to look at this. Like, I don't need to be a part of this, what's happening right now. And they were like just straight up broadcasting it, trying their best to get every angle possible of his lifeless body. And I was like, for the love of God, please stop. Like, if
okay, I just
anybody
I just saw a couple of frames of that, and I see what you
Yep.
mean.
For anybody that doesn't know what we're talking about, for whether it be on the YouTube, where you're listening to it or wherever you're listening to it, what we're referencing is the Euros 2020 tournament is occurring right now. Um, the first game of the Euro 2020, the actual very first game, was Denmark versus Finland. Denmark's star player Christian Eriksen ended up going down, just collapsing on the field, and actually later it basically came out that he had gone into cardiac arrest and basically had died on the field. And the CPR and emergency medicine that was, administered on the field right then and there basically saved his life. And they were able to get him to the hospital. He's in stable condition now. He's never going to play soccer again because
to make his way in for Finland.
It's happening again, and it's one of those where it's very sad and it's very shocking and it's very unfortunate, and it does happen a lot in sports. People don't realize this. I mentioned it to the PA that I work with, and he actually said he literally listed off the heart condition that they're probably going to find, which he listed it off, and it's a long name. I can't remember exactly what he said, but essentially it's like the thickening of the of the wall of the heart, where it doesn't allow blood flow to enter the heart. And then at some point, basically, they just like it happens a lot in athletes and young athletes, and they just collapse. And a lot of times, if there's not immediate administered CPR, they die. And that's why it was, really incredible, and it's really amazing, and it's just astounding for the whoever responded, the doctors that were able to respond on the spot there and basically save this guy's life. Was awesome. And CPR should definitely be something that people are at least informed on or know, or present in the situation, because literally it saved this man's life, and for them to do that. And yeah, so it was a very sad moment, but it was just did not help that the TV broadcast decided to try their very best to get the best angle they possibly could of this man's lifeless body, with his wife crying, standing on the field next to him. That was another great scene that they had to broadcast on live TV. That was fantastic. And like the announcers have to continue to say stuff about it, because it's not the announcers that are deciding to continue to watch this. It's literally the TV production that's happening. They could have thrown to the studio. They could have gone to, somebody could have hopped on a camera back at the studio and started to, literally, it's a situation where nobody would blame somebody for hopping on,
Just to
ad
narrate
lib
it.
and trying to just, you know, take time. Nobody would care. Nobody would, think that they were ridiculous or, whatever. So they really needed to, and they didn't, and it was sad and disturbing. But ultimately, he's okay. He's stable in the hospital. He was awake. He did actually give out a message to his fans and everybody watching. So hopefully they are able to figure out what it is. He's never going to play, football again, which is
That's what I was
unfortunate
gonna
as
say.
well.
So that's like he isn't like that's gonna be
Oh
that's
yeah,
gonna be it.
there's no way. Like, it's just, if it is like the thickening of the heart or even something similar, you're never going to be able to play again, because it's just, if you push your body to that limit again, it could happen in a situation where you're not so lucky. So yeah, this is pretty much the end of his career.
Wow. Yeah. So he's 29. I thought maybe he could have been a little bit younger or whatever else it is, but man, like that's something really it comes up like now amongst all the other things that you've been in.
I guess it's a very common thing amongst sports athletes, and it happens in younger athletes too, where essentially it's a condition that's you don't really diagnose. You can't really diagnose it because you don't know it's there until, unfortunately, it takes effect, and it's just where the wall of the heart just slowly thickens over time, and then reaches a point where you're at such a peak extreme strenuous activity, where then it goes and it finally takes effect. And this is when it does. If you have instant help like this, and CPR is administered, and life-saving health medicine is administered right there on the spot, then you might make it out okay. But in other scenarios where that's not the case, players just die. People, so it's just
Oh my god.
crazy, you know lucky that the doctors that were there responded so incredible, immediately, and so, like, well, I guess is the way that I'll say. I can't find a better word for that, but basically, it's there's a lot of congratulations to them on just doing literally the best job they could have.
Yeah, it's very hard to get like a full capture of anything. Man, they had to protect or they had to like shield him because he was straight up getting full CPR on the field, and it was just
Yeah,
very vivid and very
that's
right there.
that's what I'm saying. It was this man's, like, that's a human being. His, he has a literal wife literally sitting there not far from his lifeless body crying, and we're just going to broadcast on live TV, which is just, it was sad, and it was sad, and it was, I like, it's just sometimes, like I said, we know that the media goes too far sometimes, and it was just sometimes when they do, it's really astounding. And this is one of those moments.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
and then the reason why I chose this photo to kind of finish up the conversation and everything, and try somewhat to transition from that. The reason why I picked this photo was because this is the same game where Finland actually did end up winning 1-0, and this is actually the first goal that this guy ever scored for his team, for Finland, and he opted not to celebrate or anything. which is, very understandable, under the circumstances and situations. So, but yeah, so that's why I chose this photo, because I was like, we don't need to show any more of this guy. There's way too much that's already been shown. I'll mention his name. We'll talk about the situation, but that's, as far as we're gonna go in that scenario.
Yeah, it's hard to know where to like end things, but man, like I can't. Again, I can't imagine playing the same day, hours later or whatever, after seeing that.
Yeah, I guess the teams voted like to do it. I guess the teams like collectively said like, we should play on, at least an honor or respect to the game, kind of thing for him, which is understandable, and I get it. And you could say all, people could say all they want about like, well, they should have postponed the game or whatever, but people you don't know how you're going to respond until you're in that situation. So the fact that they responded the way they did is, it's okay.
Yeah.
I think it's totally fine.
Incredible.
So, okay, now we're gonna try to transition to a little bit of a lighter topic, in get our Bears talk in for the podcast, because we are a podcast where both of us are huge Chicago fans and live in the Chicagoland area. So we have to at some point address the new Bears news, which every week there's always something and will always be something, and we'll make something if needed.
Right.
But no, so the interview happened with Matt Nagy on the Chris Collinsworth podcast, which I don't know if you've ever listened to the Chris Collinsworth podcast. It's okay. It's not Chris Collinsworth. He actually has good conversations with like the people that he has on. They're actually pretty genuine conversations where, and I feel like Chris Collinsworth has gotten to a point where he's a very good interviewer, where like he opens them up with like just good questions, stuff to kind of get them open a little bit, and then hits them with some questions that are, what we want to know kind of things.
Yeah.
So what you're seeing on your screen is the question was posed to Matt Nagy, basically saying, would you, or is there any scenario in which Justin Fields will start week 1? No, he said basically Andy is our starter, Justin's our number 2. And he said something along the lines of, we're sticking with that plan. I actually do have the audio for the original thing. I think I did send it to you. I don't know if you want to pull that up in a minute while we're talking about it. Just to play the audio, because there was some confusion about like what the actual quote was and everything, and like, did he say that there's no possibility, or whatever. So he, people were in the comments where, of course, like posts like this were made where people were like, oh, it's definitely Andy's number 1 and Justin's number 2, and that's it. And it's like, well, he said that, he kind of said that, he kind of didn't. Basically, along what he said is that he's sticking with Andy Dalton as the starter at the moment.
Sure, I can go ahead and play it actually if you wanna.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Is there a possible scenario where Justin Fields plays on opening night?
No, I mean, Andy is our starter, and again, I can't predict anything. That's you know how it goes. I mean, there's so many things that could happen between today and that week 1, but Andy is our starter, and Justin's our number 2, and we're gonna stick to this plan.
Yeah, so a typical Nagy answer.
Yeah, it's a very typical Nagy answer where he's kind of deflecting, but also talking about it, but also addressing the issue, but like leaving it slightly open, but not. It's not as definite as some people were saying.
Yeah, definitely not.
Him saying that there's a possibility, he doesn't know what's going to happen. Nobody does, kind of thing. Him saying that is him leaving the door open, but it's definitely a very, very small crack when the door's left open. Because if you actually listen to the full interview, and I think it was like 48 minutes, the whole podcast interview, which I listened to all 48 minutes, it seemed basically like Matt Nagy is 100% strong in his camp of thinking that basically you can't start a rookie quarterback, or you shouldn't start a rookie quarterback, and that you should bench them and allow them to grow. Which there's a lot of merit to that conversation. There's some quarterbacks are ready as soon as they get thrown into the fire, and then some quarterbacks aren't, and some quarterbacks need time to learn. I think, in my opinion, if I'm really gonna go for it, and you can give yours after mine, I think that essentially players should sit for as much time as possible. And I say as much time as possible because I don't think it needs to be a full season. I think it's different for every player, but I think players do need to sit so that way they have time to digest the NFL. Because the NFL is different, and once you actually get to NFL weeks, practice, preparation, and you're watching a starter prep and everything like that for the next week, you learn a lot about how to watch film, how to use your time to the best ability in between weeks and everything, because it is a short week to the next game, and it's the NFL where teams are trying to figure out, defenses are trying to figure out how to basically stop you and develop a defense to stop you, and you need to learn how to watch film, what keys you need to learn, stuff like that, and then how to act, what you can do that you couldn't do in the end, in college football, what you can't do now that you're in here that you could do in college football, things like that. You're going to learn from a veteran starter ahead of you, watching him week to week. And that's what I think needs to happen with Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields definitely 100%, in my opinion, just everything I'm hearing, watching his talent and everything, he has the capability of being a very good starter in this league and the potential to be a very, very good starter in this league. I'm talking a star quarterback in this league, and that's what we're hoping. But I think he does need the time to learn the offense, watch Andy Dalton as a starter, learn, how it works, how the NFL works, because everybody does. It's the speed of the NFL is always quicker than anything that's come before it. The NFL is made up of every best player from their college team is in the NFL. Whether it's a small school, whether it's a big school, the best players from those teams are in the NFL. So when you're playing against college teams, you might not be playing against the best college teams, and there might be one or two good players on those teams that you're playing against that are NFL caliber. Well, now you're playing against an entirely NFL defense with an NFL coaching staff that is also going to try every single week to beat you and learn to beat you and figure out your weaknesses and exploit them. And so learning to kind of combat that is what I think rookies need to do. So I am in favor of sitting him. My next thing that I'll say about that, though, is I don't think he needs to sit the entire season. I think he will at some point during the regular season. I think it'll be kind of in the middle of the season, probably week 6, week 7, somewhere in that range earlier. But I do think that he does need to sit for at least the first few games and watch a quarterback prep week to week in the actual NFL.
Yeah, I think pretty much that Andy Dalton at this stage in his career isn't going to be like a world beater, anything else like that. I think he's your epitome of like the guy that you want to learn from and the guy that you want to spend time like watching and play and everything. I think he'll be adequate. He might even, again, we have to remember that Andy Dalton is going to be like in arguments for the best starting Bears quarterback of the past 50 years, like straight up by existing. Yeah, that's a fact. Sad. So he's in that conversation immediately as he starts, like wherever he ends up and however he ends up playing or whatever. But that's important to keep in mind. So I am definitely in favor of him sitting. I think you have to also remember the rest of the team is also meshing together too. It's a different team every year. Yes, there's a lot of returning starters, but you've got new rookies, you've got new people. The biggest concern, obviously, that sticks out to me is going to be the line. And now that we have a whole new left tackle, you have Jenkins, you want to get... I foresee the same thing. I think everyone's kind of in the same boat, especially it's a good balance. You want not the entire season to see Andy Dalton, but maybe for 3 to 4 weeks, I feel like is the general consensus among people. And then if things aren't working out and they're not rolling and there needs to be a spark, then that's probably where you're going to see it. But that allows enough time for the rest of the team to come together. The line itself maybe to mesh a little bit, receivers and stuff to get the timing. Cole Kmet hopefully coming on the scene a little bit more and maybe in the passing game. I think everyone's kind of in conjunction that if they need that spark and they're in a dangerous situation, and even if they're not, that's probably a good amount of time to see the rest of the season out. And it all depends on what they look like. It all depends on, are they not getting touchdowns? Are we going with field goals again and not converting? So obviously everything goes into context and everything else, but Andy Dalton as your starter isn't the worst thing in the world. And I think that, yeah, he is a professional in every sense. He's kind of like Nick Foles, except he doesn't suck as much as he does anymore. And I'm sure he's going to teach him the game and keeping up with everything. But yeah, I think you need to see it. I think you need to see 3 to 4 weeks of film with Andy Dalton as your starter, and for Justin Fields to see that and then see himself in that same role and what he's going to change and what's going to be different when he eventually steps out in the field. So I don't think it's a good idea to send him right out there and to do that. It'd be exciting and it'd be great to see him immediately dominate, a la like a Justin Herbert, I think Justin Herbert didn't start the season because of Tyrod, but it was early. But he came on and immediately dominated. So yeah, everyone wants to see that, of course. But I think that is the safest route. That's probably what we're going to see. It's important to remember for everyone else that Matt Nagy's not on the hot seat. He just isn't this year. He's not going to blow his chance at having a franchise quarterback in the first couple of weeks in the season. He's going to have time. He has time. Probably so does Pace at this point too. So they're going to take it slow, and for better or for worse, that's what we're going to see. Hopefully that ends up paying off, because if it ends up being like a 8-9 type of season or whatever, and you end up getting a franchise quarterback stepping on the sophomore year, then great, it was worth it. But yeah, it just matters what's going on. Obviously, the team's going to look a whole lot different. There's a lot of people who are going to be up for renewals or being cut from this year, so it's important. This year's important, but you also can't ruin the potential to have a franchise quarterback for the next 10 to 15 years. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, that I wanted to mention, because you were kind of talking about with the offensive line, and that's more of the question, honestly, right now, is whether that's going to go. I did hear in the interview, which I thought was interesting, is he was talking about the offensive line because he was kind of prompted about it based on what Collinsworth had asked him. And essentially, what he said was kind of interesting. Is basically he said, we're the idea to cut Leno was difficult, but of course it was one of those where the cap and the way that everything was going and the offensive lineman they brought in, they wanted opportunities. And he basically referenced the rookie, obviously, in Tevin Jenkins. So Tevin Jenkins is most likely going to be your left tackle starter. That's 100% set in stone. It's going to be the thing. Now, what I did think was interesting is he said, when talking about the other side of the line, he mentioned that Ifedi played very well at the position at right tackle, which makes me think that our offensive line starting day one is going to be Tevin Jenkins at left tackle, James Daniels at left guard, Mustapher at center, Whitehair at right guard, and Ifedi at right tackle.
You're right.
So then you'll have Wilkinson, Borum, the rookie, and Bars and those guys kind of stepping in to fill in backup roles. I'm okay with that offensive line, honestly. Ifedi is questionable because he hasn't been able to do it in the past with the Seahawks at right tackle, but it's a different offense, and he's learned more, and he's playing with a better offensive line coach, because Juan Castillo is one of the best offensive line coaches, if not the best offensive line coach in the NFL. I mean, look what he's been doing with offensive lines that have been injured and bad, and just what he's been able to utilize and everything like that. He's been great. So I have faith that maybe that's what's turning Ifedi's career around, is the fact that we have good coach, different offense, and all that. But does make me wonder. But I do feel better about it, though, at least because last year it was like, we have Massey, who kind of sucks and is overpaid. And then Ifedi's backing up. Well, Ifedi hasn't been that good over this career. Well, now you have Ifedi as your starter, who played decently well last year. And then now we're talking about you have Wilkinson backing him up and the rookie Borum backing him up. Now I'm like, okay, well, I don't care if Ifedi does very well, because there's two other guys behind him that, I think could start. So, I'm all for starting him, seeing how it goes, because he played well last year and earned it, and then we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, there's lots of different options. I think people are forgetting how good James Daniels was eventually, like when he was starting as well too. Like again, that inner like side of the line is looking pretty good. I mean, at worst case scenario, maybe Whitehair goes back to center. I don't really think that's going to happen. I hope Mustapher stays, because I'd like to see like how they perform all together. I know Mustapher, one of the complaints against him was maybe they weren't facing the best competition last year, and maybe got lucky. But like, go ahead and start and see how that goes. That's great. And I think that they have a really solid core, and then hopefully the tackles eventually show up too. So there's plenty of room for that. And also just going off of things that came out of camp as well, I'll go bad thing and then good thing. Bad thing was apparently Tariq Cohen. He was walking a bit stiff-legged, and he had his right leg wrapped, obviously coming off that ACL tear, so maybe there's a little bit of inflammation or something.
That's fine. That's going to be, I mean, not everybody's Adrian Peterson is going to come back.
Yeah.
Like the people are going to handle it differently, and we're 2 months out from the start of preseason, so I'm not really that worried. It's one of those where if in 2 months when preseason rolls around, this is still a thing, then I'm going to be worried. But right now, it's early. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, some people were conjecturing that possibly like Herbert was like an answer to maybe knowing the Cohen's injury was worse than thought. Maybe that's an idea. I always thought it was kind of a strange pick considering they already had a loaded backfield, with just
But
straight
Damian
up
Williams is
Montgomery.
on a 1 year, and they, losing Cohen probably scared them a little bit. So that's why I thought the pick happened. I didn't think it was because they thought maybe that Cohen's injury was more serious than it was. I
Yeah.
thought it was more about that they didn't want to end up with, they lost Cordell Patterson, who was technically in their backfield. And I feel like they made that pick because they wanted a long-term option that they can grow that would be, viable in case of injury. I think that's why they picked them, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So,
And then as for a good thing, Kindle Vildor apparently is looking really good, and I'm projecting, it's going to be him or Trufant for CB2.
outside, yep.
So
Which
hopefully those look like a good replacement.
And Vildor played very well in college. He came out of a smaller school, Georgia State, but he actually played Clemson one game. And when he played Clemson, he was like very good in it. And that's one of those where you can judge players, based on their production against smaller schools and stuff. But when you play a big school like Clemson and you're a smaller school and you're a player that's supposed to be one of the better players on your team, and you step up and play as well as he did in that game, for anybody that wants to go back and watch that film, it was impressive for a corner, and that's actually the film that I watched and what made me convinced that it was a good pick. I think that he showed a lot of great coverage skills. He's a little smaller for a corner, outside corner at 5'10", but he's got great quickness, great speed. Really was just that he needed to learn to pick up offensive routes running and everything better. And now that he's had an entire offseason and a season under his belt to do that, I do expect him hopefully to make that jump. And so if he does, that would be fantastic. And there's other great corners that are smaller. Jair Alexander is 5'10", 5'11", is one of the best corners in the league. So
Yeah.
size is sometimes an issue, sometimes not. In this case, I'm not too worried about it.
Yeah. And then I guess the two last things to look at were, I guess with the most boring one being that Nagy said he was going to be more aggressive on playing starters in the preseason as opposed to last year when there was a bunch of criticism for that, which like whatever, I could really care less about that. Hopefully it works out. I still want to get my Trubisky versus Justin Fields game in the preseason in an ideal scenario, because I remember you mentioned that was set up. So
that might be a thing, and that would be amazing if that does. And I'm gonna watch every preseason game just to watch Justin Fields. So
exactly. So I want to see that. And then the last thing that was a little bit of concern was that Goldman didn't show up for the mandatory mini camp.
Yeah, and I don't like the way that's the wording that's been around that camp. I will say I'm actually a little nervous about that because like there was some weird wording where like in that interview with Collinsworth, Nagy said at one point like Goldman wasn't in the building and we're going to talk to him about that and it'll be talked about. And I was like, and that's all he said. And I was like, that doesn't sound good. It's like,
yeah, sounds like someone might be out of shape.
Huh?
Sounds like someone might be out of shape and didn't want to show up and suck in camp. I don't know. Doesn't look good though.
Yeah, I don't know what exactly that could be, but it's not great. Let's put it that way. And Eddie Goldman was supposed to be a guy who, if we do actually get Eddie Goldman back at full strength, our defensive line is going to become way better than it ever was because Robert Quinn was rumored to be injured a lot last year and actually played well at the end of the season, which he was supposed to be healthier, which means that this season could be really good for him and a bounce back. So if that's the case, then you throw in Eddie Goldman next to Akeem Hicks and them, who, our issue last year was that, if Akeem Hicks wasn't in the middle, we couldn't stop the run to save our lives.
Yeah.
And it's because we also unfairly played Bilal Nichols a lot at nose tackle, and he should not be a nose tackle. It's not that it's not anything against him. It's just he's not a nose tackle. Which is fine. He's a great defensive tackle. He's just not a nose tackle. So getting Eddie Goldman back to be that nose tackle, to play that run stopping, will allow Bilal Nichols to do what Bilal Nichols has been doing that's made him such a good young prospect, and then allow Akeem Hicks to be Akeem Hicks again. And so I really hope that whatever this is not anything serious and that it's more of like a PR issue than anything.
Yeah, and on that same topic too, did you see that Quinn isn't practicing apparently due to a lower back issue?
Yeah, I'm not veterans when they don't practice. I'm not as worried as long as they're
But this veteran, that's
yeah.
all I'm saying.
But the thing with Robert Quinn is I'd rather him not practice because I'd rather him be healthy. Like
Yeah.
like in training camp 2 months before a preseason, I'm okay with him not being in there because I'm like, listen, this guy, like, if he wasn't healthy last season and that's why his production was as bad as it was, then literally make sure this man's healthy and anything he gives at healthy him is going to be better than what it was last year. So I could care less. That's one of those where I'm like, I could care less that he's not practicing. It's early. Who cares? He's a veteran. He's older. He'll understand. He understands how the defense runs. He played in it last year. Whether it wasn't great, but he played in it last year, so he at least knows how the defense runs. He's familiar with every schemes and stuff like that. So I'm fine with that. That
Yeah.
I'm okay with. It's
Yeah. Well,
it's very different if in 2 months we're talking about him not playing in a preseason game because he's injured. Then I'm like, okay, well, this is not good. This is a rerun of last season. But
yeah.
2 months out, I'm fine.
Well, those are I mean there's like a couple of there's like a couple of cool videos and stuff from minicamp, but that's about it. Those are like the more those are pretty much the headlines we're probably going to run with until well, there should be training camp in there. I don't know where the schedule's missing, but yeah, I think until training camp, which I have to figure out the dates of, but also the Clippers just beat the Jazz as
Yeah, I
well.
saw that. I was talking all about how the Paul George actually stepped up. But again, this is what I've said before: is that Paul George can step up, but I said he can step up for a game. So, we'll see how the next game goes.
Yeah.
It's great. It's great this game for the Clippers and everything. Yeah, Paul George stepped up, but listen, I've been a Paul George fan since he's kept in the league, and after it's unfortunate, but post injury, Paul George is nowhere near the alpha that he was before that. So
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see next game. Same with the Sixers. I'm like, or the, it's like, or same with the Bucks. It's like we'll see. We'll see what kind of team they are next game.
Yeah. No, that's all I got. We've well past the midnight mark as well, and I think I'm gonna go to sleep as well, but
Yep, that would be great.
yes, thanks everyone for tuning in, depending on where you're watching this at.
Yep.
And we'll catch you next week.
Yep. Thank you next week, where we'll have a bunch of different topics for everybody. Whatever is in the sports world next week that either I find interesting, Dylan finds interesting, or it's just interesting, we'll bring it to you. But have a good night, everybody, and we'll see you next week.